All right, everyone. Could I have your attention, please? Could I have your attention, please? We're ready to begin. Our virtual audience is anxious, and so are we. We have a wonderful program upcoming. We're excited to have you back with us. Thank you for your participation thus far. Thanks again to Ross. Let's give Ross another round of applause. Okay, I can remove the mask because I'm far enough away from you, but thank you for participating in our social distancing guidelines. We really appreciate that, and we want to continue doing that. We want to prove that we can have safe meetings. Our next speaker is going to talk to us about that very thing. Michael Dominguez is the president and CEO of Associated Luxury Hotels International. A lot of us know him well. We know them as Alhai, a wonderful organization. Michael is an experienced industry veteran. We're excited to have him with us. Let's give him a big welcome, and then he will introduce our panel. Michael? Here.
You're okay. It's a small room. It's fine. We're good. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invite and glad to be here. I can tell you it's a little cooler than Cancun, where I was just over the weekend. So, but good to be here either way. I'm going to go through and I really want to talk about the environment we're in right now. And one of the things I've talked about often is trying to provide some context around what we're going through. And it's an important one. And, I love the commentary is, because we get it all the time, specifically with the people that are watching virtually. We've at Alhai have run 9 face-to-face meetings since July. And every one of them has been to teach. We've been trying to teach what are the protocols, what does it look like specifically in the short term. And that is going to be critical in building confidence. Right now it's about confidence. And it doesn't mean your confidence. It's the confidence with the C-suite. It's the confidence with stakeholders. It's the confidence with risk management in certain companies. And I'm going to start this by a conversation I was just having is you have to think through this. And if anything comes out of this, I get this question often, what do you hope comes out of all of this? I said, I hope we have a tremendous amount of grace. I hope we all start to be a little less critical and understand we're going to learn and grow together. And, as I always say, as a meeting profession, we go to meetings and it's like, oh, that decor wasn't right, or I would have picked a different menu item. Does it really matter? Yeah, that's your opinion. But what about the experience? And what about the human connection that we're all missing today? I hope we have a tremendous amount of grace and quit being so judgmental. And I'm as guilty as anybody. That it's not a criticism. I always say any eye doctor will tell you the older you get, the reason you wear glasses is because there's a lens behind your eye that hardens. There's no way to avoid it. You can go and get LASIK, and that's what loosens it up, and then you can get away from glasses. The longer you're in something, i.e. our industry, our lens tends to harden. When we first got in here, it was all about the optimism. It was about how everything that was possible. And then the longer we're in here, the more we look at what's critical. And that's when I say I hope we have a tremendous amount of grace. So why am I prepping that? Something that we're doing here, the wristbands. In a short period right now, over the next 90 days, that's not a good idea. It's about building confidence. So you guys all have a code of conduct. You keep hearing we're going to practice social distancing. So what does it matter that you're comfortable hugging? We shouldn't be hugging if we're going to keep social distancing. And in our DNA, we all want to. I was just in Cancun with a planner, and it's somebody I've known for years, and she came up to me, she was like, I go, I know, I want to hug you too. And it's not whether I'm afraid of it. It's not whether I think I can get sick from it. It's that the optics are not good. And if you're really going to practice it, then practice it. And I've said this because when this thing took off on social media, I had somebody on my team, they said, I know what a wonderful idea. I go, it's a terrible idea right now. It's a great idea when we get into, okay, we've got a vaccine, people are still going to be uncomfortable coming out. That's where you're going to want to know where the comfort is. Right now, it's simply about follow protocol. You have a code of conduct. There's a reason there's a code of conduct. And the reason I say that, there's so many people that don't want us to meet. There's so many people that don't think we can do this and do it safely. Well, we have the responsibility to show we can. And it's the optics. And what Ross talked about, you know what ends up on social media? You guys hugging. That's what ends up on social media. And then all of a sudden people are like, well, they said it was a safe meeting, but it's not a safe meeting. That's the important part of everything we're doing. It's all about confidence, and I can't stress that enough. And we're going to talk about that because building confidence, why are the airlines trying to show you that the air on an airplane is actually cleaner than the air in your home? Because we have to build confidence with people getting on a plane, because many people for the longest time think I'm in this tin can and it's recycled air and it's really unhealthy. It's the furthest thing from the truth. The air on a plane literally is cleaner than the air in your home. The air, it's cleaner than the home or the air in your offices unless you have a HEPA filtration system. It literally removes 99.97% of all viruses and all germs in that canister, and has completely new fresh air every 2 to 3 minutes. Most people don't know that. And Patrick Pickens with Delta was going to join us today, and he's not joining us. So I'm giving Patrick his due because Delta has led that. Delta is awesome, Ross. I completely agree. And Delta is the airline. They have led through this, and they're the only airline that's still going to block middle seats through March. And when you talk to them, you know what they'll tell you? It's not about safety. It's about confidence. The only reason they're doing that is if you've been, especially the Northeast, there is a real separation on how people view the virus and the pandemic, right? Not the virus itself, but the pandemic, the experience. Your experience is what you experienced, and it's real. That's not critical. But the people in the Northeast, they have no idea how some people in the South are meeting and moving when they're still on lockdown or they've been on lockdown for 6 months. They can't understand it. Now, the impact was so much more severe during that time frame, and how it hit, it's their reality. Very different than what we experience in the South, very different than what we experience in the West and even the Midwest right now. So you have to kind of keep that in mind, because going around, it's building that confidence with certain people. And when we've talked to Delta, think about that. I haven't seen a human being for 90 days, and the first time I do, you're 3 inches from me. That's going to freak you out, and that's not going to make you very comfortable. That's just human nature. So one of the reasons of keeping that middle seat is exactly that. So we're going to talk through all of this. I'm going to give you some context around it. My frustration through all of this is, you know, I sometimes get hit a little bit because I'm beating up the media. I think the media has done a poor job of providing context around what they're reporting on. And that's not just beating them up. It's they have to learn how to report on a pandemic, just like leaders are having to learn how to lead through a pandemic. It's all new space for us, and you're going to see what I'm talking about. There is context around what's happening today. But I'm going to start with something that I think is really interesting. And one of my favorite speeches of all time is a commencement address by Admiral McRaven. And Admiral McRaven was a 36-year Navy SEAL. He actually went to the University of Texas. So he actually did this commencement address, hands down the best leadership speech I've ever heard. And I mean that sincerely. And what he ended up doing, the mantra for Texas is what starts here will change the world. He actually put a speech together that basically said, here are the 10 things I learned as a Navy SEAL that you need to understand if you're going to change the world. And it was all about leadership. But when I thought about 2020, there's this one clip in his speech and the one lesson he had that I thought was the perfect summary of 2020. So I'm going to start with Admiral McRaven.
Several times a week, the instructors would line up the class and do a uniform inspection. It was exceptionally thorough. Your hat had to be perfectly starched, your uniform immaculately pressed, your belt buckle shiny and void of any smudges. But it seemed that no matter how much effort you put into starching your hat or pressing your uniform or polishing your belt buckle, It just wasn't good enough. The instructors would find something wrong. For failing uniform inspection, the student had to run fully clothed into the surf zone, then wet from head to toe, roll around on the beach until every part of your body was covered with sand. The effect was known as a sugar cookie. You stayed in the uniform the rest of the day, cold, wet, and sandy. There were many a student who just couldn't accept the fact that all their efforts were in vain, that no matter how hard they tried to get the uniform right, it went unappreciated. Those students didn't make it through training. Those students didn't understand the purpose of the drill. You were never going to succeed. You were never going to have a perfect uniform. The instructors weren't going to allow it. Sometimes, no matter how well you prepare or how well you perform, you still end up as a sugar cookie. It's just the way life is sometimes. If you want to change the world, get over being a sugar cookie and keep moving forward.
I just think that's 2020. We have all been a sugar cookie in 2020. And if you hear the messaging, sometimes no matter how hard you try or how well you prepare, you're still going to be a sugar cookie. That's the environment we're in. And I'm not, I have a lot of people that tell me, I'm so looking forward to 21. The virus doesn't know there's a calendar. So we're not exactly going to just stop on January 1. But what I do know is 21 is going to be much better than 20. At least part of 21 is going to be much better than 20. And I think that's what we're all excited about. I sometimes caution people because it seems like the calendar is going to be the stop zone. No, it's not. We're still going to have issues. We're still going to have pockets of outbreak. We're going to start moving a vaccine around the country. It's going to be all kinds of challenges, but it's going to be better. That's the point. It's going to be a better year. Some of the best news out there right now, we all know it's the vaccines, and the vaccines are the game changer for our industry. You continue to see reports that only 50 to 60% of people will even take a vaccine. So how are we going to get to herd immunity? Goldman Sachs actually did a whole study, and they've actually laid out what they see as far as us getting to herd immunity in the United States, and they're predicting April or May. Why? Because if you listen to the CDC and there's 10 cases for every 1 case that we have found, you have about 80 million Americans that have already had the virus. Some of them, most of them asymptomatic. And that's the important part. So if you have 80 million, you don't have to get to 65% on the herd immunity, you don't have to go vaccinate 190 million. You need to vaccinate about 110 million. We have 330 million Americans when it's all said and done. So that's why Goldman Sachs is looking at that prediction, because what we're not factoring in are people that already have antibodies. How long the antibodies will last, I know there's great argument, but it gives you time to get everybody in play. The biggest thing with this is AstraZeneca and Moderna and Pfizer have all been approved by UK regulators or European regulators. So it's in Europe, they got the green light, they'll start distributing this week. We're expecting our FDA to actually get approval this week sometime. We're hoping on Friday. If not, it'll be Monday. Although they had the information a week earlier, I'm not going to go there. I don't know why it's taking them so long because UK regulators are moving forward. What do we know about the vaccines? Here are the important parts of it is, the vaccines right now, when you look at AstraZeneca, they are running a 90% efficacy rate as far as a double dose. A single dose is only about 60%. What does that mean? For 90% of the people, it is completely effective. That other 10% can still contract the virus. Here's the important part with Pfizer and Moderna. Pfizer's at 95%, Moderna's at 95%. The important part with Moderna, if you did not hear, Moderna has now announced they have a 100% efficacy rate for serious COVID. What does that mean? If you get the vaccine and even if you get COVID, you won't end up in a hospital. That's the difference. That was big news last week that wasn't really shared. To get 100% efficacy on serious, that's what you want. And it's an important one. Now it's about distribution. And by the way, the US has bought 1.6 billion doses, and in a very smart approach, they bought everything. They bought a little bit of everything so that if one science didn't work and another one did, you still had a vaccine in play. It was a very smart approach. There's something called Operation Warp Speed that not many people have talked about. I just saw the doctor that's in charge of that talking about how we're going to distribute. The plan has been there. And again, you've been hearing, we're not going to be able to distribute it. It's too complicated. They have been planning on distribution for about 6 months. And you know who's been helping? The military. You know who's really good with logistics? The military. I mean, literally, they can move an army around the world and move 500,000 troops when they need to and set up literally a city. They can do this. And that's the important part. The important part right now is we've bought more of AstraZeneca than any other. And AstraZeneca is the one that's coming from Europe. Now, why is that important? AstraZeneca actually transport at regular fridge temperature. All you've heard from the media is it's going to be complicated because of how cold the vaccines have to be kept. Well, that's Pfizer's vaccine, as you can see, which is the third one down. That's not all vaccines. And which one did we buy the most of? AstraZeneca, which actually can be transported at regular temperatures. That's the important part. What we have in play is Moderna, Pfizer, and AstraZeneca. So we should be very hopeful because that's moving and moving quickly. And that the AstraZeneca was part of an Oxford study. I think what's been missed too, when people have talked about the vaccines, this is an important part. I got to listen to Dr. Burke's, and she spoke to the National Congress of State Legislators. And what was interesting is when she talked about vaccines, the reporting was vaccines are being rushed. And that's what freaked out everybody, saying, I'm not taking it because we're getting a vaccine faster than we've ever seen. A couple of things she said that were really important. First, this vaccine was simple to attack, or this virus was simple to attack from a vaccine perspective. Dr. Burke has been working on a malaria vaccine for 20 years. They can't get one because it's very complicated on what they have to attack. She said this vaccine was easy because they knew exactly what they were attacking. Do you know what the technical name for COVID-19 is? SARS-CoV-2. Why? Because it's a cousin to SARS, which was a major epidemic in 2009. I read a report yesterday. They're thinking that's why Asia, by the way, has had less impact in second waves, because they have already part antibodies to the SARS epidemic, which was much worse in Asia than other parts of the world. But people are missing that. The molecular breakup is a relationship to SARS. This is a cousin to SARS. So that's why they knew how to do it. Why did the vaccine move so fast? Most of us know nothing about a clinical trial or never have until this. And that's the problem. So the media should be doing a much better job of educating us. Most clinical trial phase 3, and this is what I learned from Dr. Burke's, most clinical trials in phase 3 will have 5,000 to 8,000 patients. Why does it take 2 more years? Because you have to get to about 35,000 to 40,000 patients for efficacy to really be effective and know it's safe. Just a larger population. You know how many people were in the Pfizer study? 40,000. You know how many people were in the Moderna clinical phase 3? 35,000. We got to the number quicker because you have a global pandemic. There's enough people to actually get into the trial. And by the way, you have to volunteer for the trial. So the reason it takes years is because you're getting volunteers to actually get into the trial so that you can get to that type of number. That's number one. Doesn't mean we sped up what we normally did from a clinical standpoint. We just got the audience that large. The other reason, isn't it weird that we just found out it works and you're hearing we have 50 million doses coming our way between Pfizer and Moderna alone? Well, they were producing at risk. What does that mean? These pharmaceutical companies were producing before they even knew it worked. Why? Because the government was going to buy it. If it didn't work, the government was writing the check. It didn't matter. One way or another, they've sold the vaccine, even if it didn't get an FDA approval. Nobody in their right minds would ever do that in any other time. There's no pharmacy or biomed company that would be producing at risk unless they knew somebody would pay for it. But that's why we have doses already ready to go. Why will we have over our multi-billions of doses around the world in 21? Because they've all been producing at risk. So that's an important piece of the puzzle on why the vaccines are moving faster. And again, I think I always say this is all about context, but these are the different vaccines in play. Moderna is not even on here, by the way, because the US is buying most of Moderna. So Moderna is not in play in the rest of the world. It's really these vaccines that are in play around the globe. And you can see where they've already been purchased. So these vaccine producers, the reason they're doing it in mass, they've been purchased by the governments of these countries long ago. And that's what has moved the process even faster. The important part is when I told you about the efficacy rate, at 95%, the only thing more effective is tetanus and Ebola. This has the same efficacy or same efficiency as the measles, a measles vaccine. And we know that's been quite effective. So this kind of gives you some context around it as well. Not only did it move fast, it's really effective. And that's going to be the important part. I am not here to be a vaccine trumper, be up here saying everybody needs to go get their vaccine. I'm trying to give you the science behind it and tell you the evidence behind it. If the thing holding you back from a vaccine is that you think it was rushed, that's what I'm trying to counter. If you don't want to take a vaccine or don't believe in a vaccine, I'm not here to counter that either. All I'm trying to tell you is here's the science behind it as far as how it was produced and how effective it is, most importantly. And why is that important to our industry? This is back from a GBTA poll, but you can see 52% of travel managers and business providers will tell you the one piece that gets things moving is an effective vaccine. It's an important part of the puzzle. So it's an important one mentally. When I talk about context, I was just in Cancun this past weekend. You can see that cases are starting to spike. And by the way, when I'm going to show you cases, I only look at a 7-day curve. I do not care about any single day number, because depending on testing, when you were tested, when it was reported, was there a backlog, when it came in, those numbers move. You look at trend lines. It's the only thing. So when I say the media doesn't give you context, when they tell you we hit a record number, I only care if I hit a record number in a 7-day trend. I really don't care on any given day because there's too much noise in the number. And that's the important part when you're taking a look at these. So I always watch the line. And you do see this was Mexico. There was a guideline from the CDC where the CDC was recommending you don't travel to Mexico. By the way, the State Department had no restrictions on any travel to Mexico. The problem I have is we put this blanket on. If you hear that, you're thinking Mexico's dangerous. I shouldn't be going to Mexico. Well, what's in truth, you can see these are by cases, it's Mexico City. It's a very dense population that is being most impacted, and you have to know where the breakout is. You have to do your homework. I wish, again, that the media would do this for us, but this is what we should be providing. Tell me what I need to know. Why do I say that? Because I was literally in Cancun, which is in the far right-hand corner, that doesn't have an issue. And by the way, has been certified by the WTTC as a safe venue because of the protocols they have. They're over the top, by the way. And what we talk about, and sometimes what we think about here, you can't walk anywhere without hand sanitizer being pumped under your hands. You don't have a choice. They do it. And I joked because I had hand sanitizer getting into the car. I had hand sanitizer getting out of the car. I had hand sanitizer pumped on me when I was checking in. I went and dropped my stuff off. I was meeting the GM for dinner. I come back down. They're about to do it again. I go, I'm good. I said, my hands are raw right now. We're good. It's been 3 times in 20 minutes. I appreciated it. And the things they did and they thought about, even at dinner, you know what they did? They bring you little paper bags so that you have somewhere to put your mask and you keep it on the table. It's just some really thoughtful, I think, inventive work that they've put in Mexico. Felt completely safe. And by the way, you had no option with your mask. In the hotel, they're strict with it. And they'll tell you, as long as you are seated, you can take your mask off if you're with your family. By the way, anytime you're moving, your mask needs to be on. And I watch them stop somebody with their ice cream as they're walking out. It's like, sit down and finish your ice cream or put your mask on. Well, like, I can't eat my ice cream with my mask. Then sit down and eat your ice cream or put your mask on. And they're being very strict with it because it's all about confidence. And this is the most important part. Whether you believe in it or not, or whether you have your own opinions, be respectful enough to the team members that are having to work it. And when I talked to the general manager and I had dinner with him, that was the thing. He goes, it's all about keeping my team safe. That's why I'm asking you to keep a mask on. Whether you think it's important or not, I have team members I'm asking to serve you, that I'm asking to work, and they may be a little nervous about it. That was real. It's really eye-opening. And I've traveled, and by the way, I should mention this. I have traveled, this is my 22nd trip since July 9th. And I've been traveling, and I'm not trying to be a martyr. Somebody introduced me on a panel recently. It's like, Mike has bravely been traveling. Stop. I actually believe in the protocols I'm telling you about. It's not brave if I really believe that air travel is safe and hotels have done a really good job of protecting us. That is an important part. What do you need to do? I said, look, I've traveled all that time. I get tested twice a week. I've been negative all the way through this. And every time I say that, my wife's like, oh, don't say that. You're going to jinx yourself. I don't believe in jinx. I believe that I'm following protocol. And guess what? I keep myself out of bars and nightclubs. That's an important part of it. And when we talk about protocols in the hotels, it's an important one when you're planning meetings, because you can plan between 7 and you can plan between that time you have dinner. and finish. But if you do all that work and you have 200 people go hit the bar and a lobby bar that was built for about 50 people, you've just killed everything you've done. So how do you control that? And the one thing we've recommended to everybody, it's really simple because we've learned, we've also held 9 face-to-face meetings at Alhi since July 9th. And again, it was to learn and to educate. And at the first, there was a joke. They said, how do you do a networking reception in this environment? I said, you don't. That was my answer for a while. We figured out how, but it was really different. You know what we ended up doing? We kept everybody seated. And what you did is when you checked in, we had 4 different rooms for the reception. You had an assigned table. There were 72-inch rounds, 4 people on each table. Every setting had a small plate that would have had 4 hors d'oeuvres that normally would have been passed. They're not, they're seated. And you know what you find? Alcohol is a great incentive. I'm not serving you a drink until your butt's in the chair. And people will sit down. It's real simple. It's easy to do. And you know what we did? We sat them down, and this was really cool. It also helped on choke points because we sat everybody down. They're in different rooms. We released different rooms 5 minutes at a time to get them to dinner. So all of a sudden, you don't have choke points with everybody leaving at the same time. And then you know what happened at dinner? They had another table of 4. So they got another 3 people that they got to spend time with when it was all said and done. And then when we moved to the meeting and we went into rounds again, guess what? They were at another table. Our meeting professionals that were putting this together, they literally had a scorecard to make sure we were getting people around where they wanted to. You can network in a very safe manner. You just have to really rethink this. And that's the one thing I'm stressing to the meeting professionals. When you start to meet, you have to rethink how you're doing this. It's flow. So setting up a room, this is a small enough group, probably not as much of an issue, but you've set up separation. You've done what you're supposed to do. So when we did a meeting at the Omni in Dallas, it was the largest one. We did 120 people. You know what we did? We color coded all the rooms. And why did we color code it? Because and anybody who's ever been to a good old-fashioned Irish Catholic Mass, it's exactly what we did. And we said, okay, the orange sections, you guys on both sides of the orange, you need to exit the side doors now. Everybody else remain seated. And we gave them a couple of minutes to get out of the room. And we said, green in the back of the room, you need to exit the back doors now. Everybody else stay seated. And then the other color code that was in the middle was blue, saying blue, you can now exit the side doors. So you're removing people out of the room. The instruction that is necessary in this short-term environment is something that's very different for most of us. I emceed most of those meetings, so guess what I was doing? Instructing. And we were reminding everybody, you need to keep your mask on anytime you're moving. You need to keep a mask on anytime you can't keep 6 feet of separation according to CDC guidelines, period. Why? Because we are following CDC guidelines. And by the way, if you want to make sure that nothing blows back at you, you need to follow CDC guidelines. It's that simple. And we're going to talk about some of the legislation that's out there. That's kind of the big hang up. It's really rethinking some of this. And I think Mexico's done it really well. But this, I think, gives you some visual. You have to understand context. I'm going to show you that same context in the United States. Yes, we have cases that are starting to spike. I want to point out these are three different surges. This was a Northeast surge. This was a South and West surge. And now this is really the Midwest. The Midwest is what's been driving this. And I'm going to show it to you in visibility. Now, this is as of yesterday. Rhode Island, by the way, Rhode Island and Connecticut continue to be the outliers. They are the only 2 Northeast areas that continue to lead somewhere in the top 5 as far as new cases. I can't explain it. I haven't understood it yet. I'm researching it. I can't find an answer, but something's going on in Rhode Island, Connecticut, because they keep popping up. But everything else you can see, Indiana, Nebraska, South Dakota, Alaska. You know, you thought Alaska would have been safe. It's out in the middle of nowhere. And seriously, these are the areas that are outbreaking. What's important with the numbers and what we've seen, the outbreak grew where we hadn't had it before. That's what we've seen. That's why the numbers are so big. And I'm going to go rapid fire through this, but these are cases today as of 14 days ago. You can see rising is orange, yellow is falling, and staying the same is the gray. And that's over a 14-day window. But what is falling? The Midwest. Why? Because the Midwest had led the surge. This was a Midwest surge at the moment. And I'm going to give you a visual here, but you can see the Midwest here, by the way, is Northeast as far as counts. Here's the west outbreak, the south and the west that we had in the summer that was very similar to the northeast, and look how much bigger the outbreak is now. Why? Because you've added about 25 states into the mix. They're just large numbers. Problematic, by the way, and I'm not discounting it, problematic because it's a rural part of our country. It's the rural part that has been hit during this wave. They don't have the same hospital systems as the metro areas. So that becomes problematic for us as we move forward. Another visual, just the darker the brown, the more intense the cases. You can see the dark brown is very centered to the middle of the country for the most part. And this is an interesting one. That's November 18th. Where you see maroon, it's intense. So you can see the middle of the country is blanketed right now. And if you look at these charts, and I've looked at these charts back in March and April, it was only the Northeast. And then when you got to the summer, the Northeast wasn't there. And the Midwest, by the way, in neither of the first two surges ever showed up. And what you found in the summer, it was all through the South moving into California. And then guess what happened right now in the surge? It's in the middle of the country. What you will find is it's going to make its way around. It made its way around the world. No matter what you tried to do, it's going to get there. I'm not saying don't do what we're doing. That's the important part. Realize everything we're doing is about the hospitals, making sure that the hospitals can actually accommodate the cases that are coming in. So here's the important part. That was November 18th. As of yesterday, that's what it looks like today. You can see the Midwest is lightening up. Even though the case numbers still look big, you're seeing us lighten up county by county. That's the context I'm talking about. It doesn't mean the number's wrong, that the number's still a big number, but you can see the intensity is starting to lighten up, which is important in these areas. Unfortunately, these are deaths that we've seen, and this is over the last 7 days, and you can see a lot of it's in the middle of the country. That's where it's centralized. It's pretty well spread. Hospitalizations, we're finally starting to flatten. So we should be hitting the peak here, and we should start on the other side. You've seen this in every one of the waves. You know, we are hitting a peak of about 100,000 hospitalizations. This shows you the dark purple is the west, the northeast, the south, and the Midwest. And this is November 22nd through the 29th. You can see the Midwest is declining. And again, that's where the major outbreak was over the last couple of weeks. That's actually good news. That's why I'm sharing it. We're getting to the other side of this wave. This is above and below November 25th, hospitalizations. You can see the purples are now outside the Midwest. So we are having increases in other parts of the country, no longer the Midwest. And that was the bigger indicator. I'm not going to talk about schools. They'd kind of put that in there, but this is probably the biggest issue. Almost 40% of all deaths have come from nursing homes and long-term care facilities in the US, although they represent 1% of the population. It's a problem, and it continues to be a problem with the outbreaks we're having right now. By the way, it's not US-centric. In Europe, it's 50% of all their deaths have come from long-term care facilities. It's a challenge because we know the riskiest category is 65 and over and those with underlying conditions, and you know where a lot of that population is, and we're not doing enough to protect it. And that's an important one that's going to continue to be a conversation. When you look at this, these are percentage of deaths by state, of COVID deaths by state that are actually attributed to a long-term care facility. You can see in North Dakota and New Hampshire, it's 80%. It's really where the drive is. And again, that's putting context around the numbers we're seeing because it's severe. And the number continues to grow. Not a surprise, the dark gray was before June 1. So you can see the Northeast was what was driving long-term care facility deaths prior to June 1. After June 1, it was the South and the Midwest. That's really what drove it. This is a good visual because there is also something that the CDC looks at, and they're what they call excessive deaths. So there are deaths over our baseline that we would normally be experiencing. And what isn't, again, to put some context into it, the numbers are big, not at all discounting that. We lose 2.5 million Americans a year from all causes. And that's the important context around this. So they have a baseline. What I wanted to point out is the March, April, we were 40% above the baseline. When you got into the Midwest or to the South outbreak, we were 25% above the baseline. And right now we're down to about 15% above the baseline. And it's not at all taking away any of the seriousness of it. It's just not as intense as it was before. And that's what you can see. Couple of reasons. younger demographic as far as the cases being contributed, the viral treatments that we have actually put in play to help fight it, and we actually know more about the disease, which is being helpful in that regard when it's all said and done. So that's actually some really good news. I was going to talk about Texas, but I'm really not going to talk about that. I do want to talk about the only thing about Texas, and now California is following suit. Texas and the governor, actually I will back up, I need to show you this. The governor of Texas, I thought, has done a beautiful job of really looking at this from a logical perspective. And what do I mean by that? This red line you see going across, what he looked at is he doesn't care about cases. He's looking at hospitalizations because he knows this is all about making sure the hospitals can handle anything that comes at them. And what he did was put a threshold that no hospital can have COVID cases being more than 15% of total hospitalizations. If they do, automatic restrictions kick in. You don't have to guess when or where, and it has to be for 7 days. You know who just went into that? Fort Worth. Fort Worth just went into it because for 7 days they had a number of hospitalizations that were above 15%. The bars are closed, gyms are closed, and they've gone to 50% occupancy in restaurants again. And by the way, when they get to 7 days without it, they will be removed from the restrictions and they'll be able to move back to the area they were. There's no guessing on what it means. Everybody knew it was coming. They had been talking about it for a week because they had been at the 15%. Guess what California just did? California just went into zones and they're looking at 15% ICU hospitalizations as their threshold. They're finally going to start putting that around it because it makes more sense as far as what that looks like. Florida and Texas, they've been really consistent. They look at capacity. They don't look at anything else. And I've said this, any state, any city that's telling you only 10 people can meet, it's silly. And I had 7 OSHA officials that I had a conversation with on September, I forget the date, but it was the Friday before Labor Day. And I still don't know how they got my name, but we ended up talking and they were asking, how can we help? And I said, can you put some standardization around how we're looking at this? And I actually made them laugh because I said, any number doesn't make sense. Because I go, LA at the time had 50 people. I said, so at 48, I'm okay. At 51, we're now dangerous. And they laughed and I said, but that's what you're saying when you put a number on. Without context, it doesn't mean anything. I said 50 people in a phone booth is crowded. 50 people in a 5,000 square foot ballroom isn't. So if you can actually just do this on capacity, if you can look at, okay, if I have a ballroom that can usually hold 1,000, if I can only hold 500, that's 50% capacity, then we're good. But by the way, if I have to follow CDC guidelines and social distancing, I'm going to be under 50% anyway. So why don't you just say we need to follow CDC guidelines? And then we should be good to go. Guess what Florida and Texas are doing? Following CDC guidelines. Georgia as well. So the reason they're doing that, and that's why they're having meetings, is because they're just saying, you got to follow guidelines. If you follow guidelines, I'm getting the distance I need anyway. But for some reason, there's a disconnect. You'll say a restaurant can have 50%, but that doesn't apply to a meeting room that I can control the entire experience. There's just a disconnect there that we're trying to get through. And again, I'm not beating up governments. This is new. But what I was telling OSHA, if you put out a standard, a regulation, every official could say, I'm following an OSHA guideline. They'd have a get out of jail free card. And that was kind of the thought process behind it. Testing is still up. That's the important part. Testing, we're up to 1.7 million tests in the US. For the longest time, you heard the US wasn't testing. We're not testing enough. We've tested more from an absolute number, and we've tested more by population than anybody in the world. And it's not even close. Those charts, you can look at the world charts. The closest one to us is the UK. Nobody else is even close to us. Now, we started slow, but you can see the aggressive uptick in testing around the US right now. That's one of the reasons you've heard about laboratories and a delay. Well, you're testing 1.7 million people a day. And I just met with, I was with somebody that works for LabCorp, and you know what they were saying? You know, we do have other tests going on too. They still have other blood work. And by the way, hospitalizations for COVID are under 20% of total hospitalizations. So you know what those other hospitalizations require? Testing, blood work, all of that is going through as well. So it's complex. That's my point. Very complex. It's not as black and white. I think we've gone through these pieces. These are some of the options. But I wanted to point out, we did something on November 11th, we actually did, and we thought this was the next step. We had done a face-to-face meeting. We had done a face-to-face in a full omni-channel solution that had a digital experience. You know what we said is, okay, if you're in New York and you have a 14-day quarantine, you really can't travel. What's next? We actually had 4 different cities. We had 4 face-to-face meetings, no more than 50 people in any one of those cities. And we had a simulcast going from East Coast, West Coast, and tied it all together into one content stream. To us, that's the next step. If you can't bring 300 people together in one place, you can bring them in multiple places and still bring the experience together. When you talk about innovation, that's really helping pull this together. And it really was. And believe me, when we did it, we were like, I hope it works, because it was something that was real different. For those of you that are thinking about hybrid, please understand that there is not a lift and shift. That does not work. You cannot say, I've got a physical meeting, I'm just gonna put it into a digital experience. That's called a virtual meeting, and all you're doing is broadcasting. That is not an experience. When we did this, by the way, we had 4 different run of shows. 4 different run of shows to be able to make this happen. Your experience, depending on where you were and in what medium you were watching, actually looked different. That was important. Some of it was broadcast, some of it was prepackaged, and then some of it was live from the meeting as well. So it's an important one to be able to rethink that, and we can have a bigger discussion about it. Economics, I just wanted to point out the US actually was positive in November for the first time from an actual profitability. And what's interesting is if you go down the middle, we're still 95% down to last year, but it was $5 in profit per available room. So we're at least turning the corner. That is a positive note. Leisure traffic is back. So everyone who tells you that nobody's going to travel to a meeting, they are not looking at the numbers, because our hotels on the weekends are jam-packed. And that's the same person that you're saying won't travel to a meeting. They're traveling on their own for leisure. There are some hiccups, and we're looking at this. This is the biggest issue. We may have a stimulus bill by Friday. The only thing that changed, by the way, is who's going to be in the White House. And, you know, I love Ross, what he said, because I'm the same way. I do not care about politics. I care about policy, because the policy will impact what happens to our industry. This bill, by the way, is about $1 trillion less than what the White House was willing to sign off on before the election. So they're going to get a $900 billion stimulus bill. Most importantly for us as an industry, there's liability protection. The liability protection is what we've been waiting for, especially for some of your incentive trips. Your risk management needs to know that they're not going to get sued in certain companies as long as they're following guidelines. That's coming. And that's part of this bill. What they're still negotiating is the language around liability, how long it's going to last. You know what the liability protection has been is simply, if you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing according to local health officials and CDC guidelines, you can't be sued. That's all. You can't be sued over a window of time. I think right now it's going to be about 18 months. Because if not, you're going to get frivolous lawsuits. And it is impossible to say where you got COVID, by the way. You could be here in a meeting, go back home, get sick. It doesn't mean you got it from the meeting. You could have gotten it in your Uber. You could have gotten it at the airport. You could have gotten it at your grocery store. It could have been from a lot of different places, but the lawsuits will come. And the problem with that, unless you have liability insurance or some type of program put in, is anyone who's ever had to deal with those, it's cheaper to pay it off than to litigate. And you're just going to end up being in this normal cycle of a lot of litigation over a short period of time. So that's coming. I'm going to end with this, and then we'll get into the panel, but I want to end with another video from Admiral McRaven, and here's the discussion from Admiral McRaven. I think this is important looking forward because it is getting better. We're going to have a better environment, but there's still going to be obstacles, and we need to know that. I always say, at least we know what road we're on. There's just going to be a speed bump every now and then. And you're going to have to slow down for the speed bump. And that's kind of how it's going to look moving forward. But Admiral McRaven has a thing about how you take on challenges, and I thought it would be a great way to wrap this.
At least twice a week, the trainees were required to run the obstacle course. The obstacle course contained 25 obstacles, including a 10-foot wall, a 30-foot cargo net, a barbed wire crawl, to name a few. But the most challenging obstacle was the slide for life. It had a 3-level, 30-foot tower at one end and a 1-level tower at the other. In between was a 200-foot long rope. You had to climb the 3-tiered tower, and once at the top, you grabbed the rope, swung underneath the rope, and pulled yourself hand over hand until you got to the other end. The record for the obstacle course had stood for years when my class began in 1977. The record seemed unbeatable until one day a student decided to go down the slide for life head first. Instead of swinging his body underneath the rope and inching his way down, he bravely mounted the top of the rope and thrust himself forward. It was a dangerous move, seemingly foolish and fraught with risk. Failure could mean injury and being dropped from the course. Without hesitation, the student slid down the rope perilously fast. Instead of several minutes, it only took him half that time. And by the end of the course, he had broken the record. If you want to change the world, sometimes you have to slide down the obstacles head first.
So I thought he summarized 2020 perfectly, and that's perfect for 21. You got to take this on head first. So thank you. On your own time, I highly recommend go watch the 19-minute video. It's well worth it. His lessons about life are just really inspirational. And it starts with number one, and he wrote a book, is first make your bed. Make your bed every morning. And that is the name of his book. And he talks about as these Navy SEALs are being trained to go take on the worst people in the world. And you know what they get evaluated on every morning? Making their bed. And the point is you complete the first task of the day. And it's about discipline more than anything. So please take the opportunity. I appreciate being here. I know we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about the industry. And Bob and Melissa, go ahead and come on up and we'll get into a little bit of a dialogue. Thank you, guys. Yeah, I'll share the presentation with everybody, please. Happy to. So we have you guys right over there, and you've got your mics ready to go, sir. All
Michael,
right.
we had some questions pop up during the virtual part
Sure.
from our attendees at home. One was from Deborah Carnegie, and she wanted to know if site members should be considered, hold on, let me read it right. Do you think that we as site members should get the vaccine?
Look, that's a personal choice. I just think if you have taken vaccines for anything else, and most of us had for measles or anything else along those lines, I think you should. And if you did not see to help instill confidence, President W, President Obama, and President Clinton are going to get vaccinated live on TV because they want to instill confidence in the public that they are willing to take the vaccine. They trust the process it's been through, and they'll be injected live. So, look, personally, even my wife asked me, "You're going to take it?" I go, absolutely. And I'm going to move there quickly because my wife has an autoimmune disease, and candidly had just been through treatments and has no T cells right now. So the reason I take this seriously is because I can endanger somebody at home if I don't. So that's the important piece of it. So why would I want to get a vaccine? To make sure I don't get her sick. And I want to see my parents more often than I have. And I want to make sure I don't get them sick. So I'm more than happy to take the vaccine at that point. But I do think that's a personal choice. That's a hard one.
We have a few more questions. Are you willing to take those at
Sure.
this time?
Yeah. Will do. All right, we're going to go to the panel first, and then we'll come back to the questions. I'm going to have Bob and Melissa introduce themselves. We had some really catchy introductions, but I missed the email, so I'm going to let them do this first. Melissa, we'll go ladies first. Is not working?
I'm McKnight. I am the banquet chef at the Omni here in Asheville. I have spent 10 years at Omni Resort. I did about 8 years at the Omni Island. I was there before it was Omni. And then I came here. I worked with a few of the Omni hotels in Dallas, and did task force in Fort Worth. So I have a lot of experience in banquets as well as restaurants. And we've really had to pivot for COVID, obviously, which I think we're going to get into a little bit.
Thank you. And Bob?
Hello again, everybody. My name is Bob Burke, and I'm the president of eGroup Communications. We're the creators and the producers of the Exchange MICE Business Conferences. We've been doing that for 11 years now. We started on the ocean. We have the river. And we just completed, it's about 15 people here were attending in Montego Bay, Jamaica. We had 125 people, and it was the first major global MICE conference face-to-face. And I'm sure there's some of the people here will talk about it. But that's basically what I'm here because you're doing a face-to-face. I think it's about time. It's great information from Michael. We had protocols. The Hyatt Ziva Zilara had protocols. All the hotels in Jamaica welcomed us really with open arms. We had nobody sick. Nobody got sick. We had a clean bill of health. And we didn't brag about it until 10 days later to make sure that nobody. But it was great. And, we have more coming. And the vaccine is going to be the big savior, I'm certain.
I would agree with that completely. Melissa, I want to start with you because I think food and beverage has had to have the biggest reinvention in this time frame. And I'd love for you to talk to a couple of things. And some of the things I've learned going through this, they see the front of the house. Some of the reinvention in the back of the house, I think it's sometimes people forget that the same restrictions I have up front, I have behind. In other words, I still have to have 6 feet of separation in the kitchen. I still have to have people wearing masks in the kitchen. What does that mean operationally, first and foremost? And what have you seen have been some of the biggest changes you've had to make?
Sure. So when I came back from furlough, I actually started, they said there's no banquet department right now. We're going to need you to work in the restaurant, but we are going to have some weddings coming up, so some catering events. So it was a big change. We brought in our associates. We had to have them trained on how to wear their mask properly. Obviously, we wash our hands frequently, so now it's even more frequent, as you mentioned with the raw hands earlier. That is totally us. As far as the 6 feet of space, the team has, probably gone down in half size. So in my kitchen, it's very easy to accommodate 6 feet of space. In some of the restaurants, we've certainly had to rearrange the way that we are setting up those stations in the kitchen.
Yeah, have you had to reduce menus anywhere? I know I've seen that in certain areas just because of that. If you're having less bodies, you're going to have less opportunity on that side.
Totally. When we first opened, when we reopened the Omni here, we had what we called a special menu, or COVID menu is what we called it, in the back of the house. And as we became more comfortable with how we were going to prepare and how we were going to order and service the guests, we were able to go back to a more specific menu, able to use our local products again. So we did start with that, and we do always offer that to the meeting planners if that's something they want. However, most people want to have as much normalcy as they can.
Right.
So they're really interested in how we're going to be able to service a buffet with our banquet attendants, servicing them instead of everyone touching the same pair of utensils. And that's really where we've gone since then.
Yeah, it is. I've been amazed. I not surprised, but amazed, because I think food and beverage teams are innovative to begin with. As we talked about, I spent most or a part of my life, 9 years of my life, in food and beverage. But what you have to do, you just overcome the obstacles. So
Absolutely.
yeah, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But Bob, any surprises on attendance? I know you've had the meeting. What does that look like from an attendance perspective from past years?
I'll tell you, it's amazing. We had to turn away about 50 buyers. We do a virtual exchange twice a week. Many of you participate in it. In the chat room, everybody talks about, are you going to go to Jamaica? This is going to be terrific. And we have pretty strict vetting when it comes to the buyers because they're hosted.
Mm-hmm.
So we get a lot of people that really aren't qualified, but we had at least 40, 50 people we had to say, you're on a waiting list. And we had 40 buyers show up, which is what we were shooting for. And I think we had the best quality ever in the 11 years we've been doing these events. And, we had to have at least 10 suppliers. We had 40 and 40, and people brought spouses and whatnot. But we had 10 Jamaica participants that paid less because they didn't stay at the Hyatt Ziva Zilara. We had the Half Moon Hotel. It had its grand opening with us, and it was an amazing luncheon that we had there. Iberostar was closed, but they opened up for us, and they had a beach party that was amazing, and they had music and dancing, and the food was unbelievable. Sandals did the final night. Sandals' final night was amazing. They had a Broadway show on that Royal Caribbean, on the island at the Royal Caribbean Hotel. But just to get to your question, Normally, we have 14 to 16 cruise lines participating with us. This land exchange, we had one cruise line because people were told they can't travel, they can't spend money. And as you mentioned, the CDC, they seem to be in charge of the cruise industry these days. But we had one cruise line and 39 other supplier entities. We had people came from Argentina, 2 from Poland, a buyer and a supplier, Scotland, Ireland, England, and Kenya, Africa. People traveled 40 hours to get to Montego Bay, Jamaica. And the testimonial, I was listening to Ross, we have some great testimonials from people who were there. And that's the best referrals we could ever get. But the guy said, 40 hours coming and going, and I wouldn't change it. I didn't find it too long, you know. That was a great event, I think, and a lot of the people here can attest to it. We had the protocols in the meetings. We had long tables that were spread out in a huge ballroom, so we had ample space. The second morning, I turned on the news and it said that President Trump got coronavirus. It was September 30th to October 5th. And I couldn't believe it. Everybody in the meeting had their masks on, you know, more so than before. But Jamaica has a very strict situation. They have a zone, a resilience zone that only tourists can go to. They can't go out into different parts of it. But we had Chukka has a terrific attraction, and we had catamarans, we had horseback riding. I mean, it was amazing. And the ATVs, everybody drove those, you know, rum tasting, Appleton rum was a big part of the whole program. We had the opening ceremony on the beach, and the Hyatt Ziva Zilara was formerly the Ritz. It's a beautiful, beautiful hotel. The Jewel Grand is right alongside of it. And that was one of our host evenings. We were supposed to be outside then, but it rained. So everybody saw what happens. They immediately put us inside and followed all the protocols. But the DMCs, we had 3 DMCs. So the buyers got to see Jamaica as a world-class incentive destination. That was the purpose of the land exchange, to present Jamaica in such a way. The chairman of the Jamaica Tourist Board, who has come on our ocean and river exchanges, proposed that we do a land exchange. And I'm most of my life in Miami. I've been to Jamaica many times, and I was never really crazy about it. But it has changed. It has come full circle. Nobody's trying to sell you drugs. There was no graffiti on the street. There was no garbage. I'll tell you, Jamaica is a world-class incentive destination every step of the way, from the moment we got off to the moment we left in their first-class lounge. It was terrific.
Thank you. Melissa, we were talking about sustainability earlier, and I know it's been some push that I've heard consistently since we've started meeting again, as the question comes up is, well, are you using sustainable products? And, you know, you and I briefly talked about, I remind everybody that there's only so much product until you need it. And if we remember when we went to paper straws, there weren't enough makers of paper straws. You know, fast forward 9 months later and everybody has paper straws. It's not an issue, but it was an issue when it started. Can you talk a little bit to that? Because what I have found is hotels, it's been over the last 5 to 6 years, not only are we looking at being sustainable, we're looking at being local and organic and helping that local community. Can you talk to that? Because that comes up all the time.
Absolutely. So we have had a few groups in-house here. And if they don't do a to-go box lunch, you know, a traditional box lunch, they want to see what we can offer. So there are some wonderful products out there, as you mentioned. However, the supply and the demand for those, you know, is kind of out of sync right now. So we do want to use the sustainable products, and they're available and they're great products. However, we're having issues getting them in, and it will just take a year or so for it to catch up, I feel like, and then everyone will have those. So what we've done is we've offered, we'll call it a box lunch, but it will be in a glass jar, the salad with the glass mason jar lid. And then we'll have the sandwich wrapped in, a nice brown compostable paper. And that way you're still getting the experience and you feel more comfortable and confident in the food that you're receiving, and that it hasn't been contaminated before you have the chance to sample it. And then, you still get that same experience of a resort high-class meal.
Yeah, and I got to experience, by the way, you make it sound so simple, the mason jars with a Caesar salad that was served with a bamboo plate, and you literally shook it, tipped it over, and all of a sudden you had your salad, and you can rewash the mason jars. It's one, sustainable, but it's two, it's also low touch. And
sure.
I know it's an Omni thing, and it's like you guys have done it really, really
Yeah,
well.
and it
So,
translates to all the meals. We do it for a fruit cup or a parfait or even a smoothie. I'm sure you've seen them where they have the nice mason jar lid with the straw.
Yeah.
It really gives you that great experience. And like you said, it's glass, so it's reusable.
well, and for all planners that have pushed on the sustainability side, and that's always the question, here's the one silver lining is when people start mass producing it, it will become cheaper, and you will have hotels continue to buy it long after COVID. So there's going to be positives to this when it's all said and done, but we're kind of in that middle hump right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Bob, any learnings from a protocol standpoint that you are going to take to your next exchanges coming up?
Well, that's a good question because we had our own protocols. We brought down a TempuCheck machine, which was outside of the meeting space, and everybody had to go in front of the screen, and it gave the temperature, and if you didn't have a mask on, it said, put on your mask. Yeah. Also, we had an ozone machine. So the room that we met in was ozoned clean the night before. So it was a clean room. Everybody was without a temperature and then went into a clean room. But when you eat, you don't have a mask on. When you go to the beach, you didn't have a mask on. Some of the bus seating was a little close. Some people were telling me.
Yeah.
We had a couple of attendees contact me for at least a week after asking if anyone got sick. Somebody coughed and sat in front of them on the airplane. But it was a clean bill of health all the way through. So, it can be done. But we did have protocols that were, strictly adhered to, especially in the hotel and by the Jamaica people. Everyone there had their mask on.
Yeah, that I've seen internationally. I see that even more so than here in the States, which sometimes is a little more. Well, when do I have to wear them? And there you're wearing them, and there's not a question. Anytime you're moving, you're wearing your mask.
No, everyone had a mask on throughout.
Melissa, one of the things that I've seen, and I'm always trying to stress to a meeting professional, is hotels have always been clean. What we're having to do now is clean for an airborne pathogen, which has a different chemical makeup and a little bit of a different process. But the way I look at it, it's more Pareto. It's 20% that we're changing protocol, but the hotels have traditionally been clean. One of the biggest changes we've seen is that it's now more in your face. We've always kind of done that behind the scenes, but from a food and beverage perspective, how much did you have to change? Because the guidelines are so strict to begin with because of foodborne illnesses. Can you talk a little bit to that? Because I think it's important that it was a incremental change to be, talking about when he said about foggers. Foggers are becoming a little bit of a norm in the meeting rooms and those type of things. That's going to be here to stay. That's not going away, and that's a good thing. But behind the scenes, what else have you had to do?
They do use the foggers in the kitchen as well when we've all left. If they can do it, midday. I've worked in a few restaurants that are open for lunch and dinner, so that's not possible until the end of the day or before service at lunchtime. As far as the cleanliness, you make a good point. We are Serve Safe certified at all the Omnis, so much hasn't changed. Some of the products that we purchased, as far as sanitizing the surfaces, is really the handlebars on the coolers. Handlebars, on the doors and the different vessels that we use. That's really what has changed. And then when we do the to-go items, we do have a special sticker that we've taken on in the Omni brand that says made safe on a certain day. And I'm sure you've seen them at other places, and they use them in the hotel rooms as well. So when you walk in, you get your fresh
remote control, and anything else that you may need to utilize in the room comes in that special bag that has been specially sanitized with a similar sticker.
I have to remind people, you can take it out of the bag. You know, you don't leave it in the bag. So
Your choice.
Kind of defeats the purpose. I think we're going to go to some questions here.
Audience. Our first question is from Kendra Carter Mansfield, and she says, I think this one is for you, Michael. Do you have any data about states that have lockdowns versus those that have not been locked down?
I guess she's talking about data on what the cases are. And I can tell you that we've seen it less in the States than I can go to Europe. Europe had the most severe lockdown for the longest period of time. And by the way, they became the largest outbreak in this wave at almost 250,000 cases a day. And what you're finding, and for some reason we tend to miss this, the WHO does not recommend lockdowns as a whole. They recommend lockdowns when you're peaking so that your hospitals don't get overrun, where you're starting to see more states do that. Because there is a thought process that if you've locked people down for such a long period of time, when they start moving again, and they eventually will, you know what happens? You have a spike. And you're starting to see that. And the lockdowns have been sporadic. Here's my best example. California's had one of the most severe lockdowns as this has started, and California led in cases 2 weeks ago. So, and it's not, I don't want that to sound as anti-lockdown. Again, my point is the lockdown and how we define it is what is interesting. What you've seen is Texas and Florida have had a little bit of a different approach because they've gradually reopened their states, and they've had spikes, but they haven't overrun the hospitals. So there's a little bit of a mixed thought process. And even in California, by county, it's starting to move around a little bit. I just look at the numbers, and when New York was at its peak, they had the strongest lockdown in the country. And the point is that unless you're going to completely tell everybody you can't leave your house for 30 days, it's not a lockdown. You're still going to a grocery store. You're still going out and about a little bit, which is going to open up some of the risk. And the most important thing is communal spread is what they're finding right now. It's communal spread. It's the people you think you know. It's your family. That's why everybody was worried about Thanksgiving, because that's where we're finding the spread more than you going out. It's being around the people you know and you get comfortable with.
Great. We had another question from John Bradley. This is for anyone who'd like to take it up there. Do you see hotels ever going back to pre-COVID protocols for meetings?
I can tell you yes. Absolutely. It's just the one thing I would warn everybody or caution, don't overthink this on how permanent everything is. If you look at every demand shock that we've had in our industry, there's all these predictions of what's going to change forever. Some of it is incremental, some of it is moderate. I hope everyone continues to wash their hands. That's a good thing. I like the cleaning protocols that will probably stay in place. That's a good thing. The technology, we overthink this, by the way. When everybody's talking about remote entry, we've been doing that in the hotels for the last 5 years. You know why we haven't gotten there? Because of capital. You only have so much money to spend. What's been good about this is the money has been invested right now into that technology in these hotels. That'll be here to stay. But that doesn't mean it was a shift from this. What it did was it literally moved very quickly into us having mass adoption. And I'm excited about that. We've had QR codes for restaurants forever. You just never wanted to use them, you know? And now you're forced to use them, which means the behavior will be there. And you think we want to print paper menus? It's an expense item. And the stuff out of a hotel room, that all the paper that used to be in there that's now gone, that's not coming back. And that's a good thing. For anybody who's sustainable, they also want the paper. That stuff is gone, and I think that's a positive. And it's forced our consumer to become more digital and adopt some of those digital assets in a traditional hotel stay. Outside of that, I can tell you the protocols, you're not going to keep 6 feet of separation forever. Through 21, I think it'll probably be there. By the way, WHO is not at 6 feet. They actually have a different requirement internationally than the US. That's very US centric to be 6 feet. So I think you'll probably get to 2 per 6 foot towards the back half of the year. And then eventually, I don't think you're going back to tables of 10 right out of the bat for a banquet event, just because of the same reason Delta's leaving a seat open. It's just to give people comfort. It'll take some time, and then it'll eventually come back. Melissa, anything to add there?
I agree. I think the 10 tops were very tight. And I think, as you mentioned, the comfort level, the people need to feel comfortable, you know, whether they're going to be in a ballroom with 500 of their close friends or they're going to be at a 4-top.
You know, the cruise lines invented the hand sanitizer. I mean, and they've, you know, you're almost forced to use it, and look what happened there, you know, so it's, you know, it's more than the hand sanitizers we're going to be.
I will tell you, if there's something you can learn or try to adopt out of this, we experienced it. And anyone who knows me, I'm a diehard Spurs fan because of Popovich and their culture, and it's been studied for a long period of time. He's had dinners, always for team dinners for 22 years. They're mandatory. Everybody comes in, but he goes and presets everything. You have assigned seating. He never allows for more than 6 people at any table because he believes the conversations then become in 2s and 3s versus a community being created at that setting. You know what I've learned in doing these meetings? When we've had tables of 4, they've been the best conversations I've ever had at an event. And I know you can't stay at 4, but if you have the space and you can do 6s, you should. Keep the conversation intimate. And it really did change. That was a learning for me coming out of this. That was very different that I would have never thought of if I hadn't. And by the way, in our surveys, it's what's come back from our meeting professionals, that it was really delightful to have a conversation with the entire table, that everybody was involved. Nobody felt like the little cliques that we end up on the table to begin with. So I hope that continues.
We have about 5 more minutes for our next session, so.
I think the question as it relates to vaccines for our industry. If you choose not to take the vaccine, what are you hearing about restrictions on travel? Do you think it's going to be tied to your passport? They won't let you travel if you're not vaccinated?
No, it's still going to come down to testing. It's if you're not going to have a vaccine, we're getting down to a digital health pass. And by the way, again, this was coming through U.S. Customs Department. I travel on global entry. I just returned, and guess what? It's all AI. I didn't even have to do fingerprints. I didn't have to put down my passport. It looks at my face, it recognizes me, and I go through. We were headed there. You're going to have a digital health pass that's going to show you've been vaccinated, and you may still require testing because you have a 95% efficacy rate, which means just because you have a vaccine doesn't mean you still can't contract COVID. So the point is, if you're really trying to limit it, it's going to come down to testing. One of the things our industry has to be prepared for, and we've shown a couple of companies the past couple of weeks, is contact tracing. And there is an application that we showed last week, it's the best I've seen, where they set up geofencing for this type of meeting. They would have a geofenced area created here in the lobby area. If we were in a hotel, they can set it up in the lobby bar, the restaurant. And what it will tell me is, let's say afterwards I was tested positive with COVID. It would tell me that Bob was not only within 6 feet of me, it will tell you that Bob was within 6 feet of me for over 35 minutes for the day. Because the CDC has told you it's 15 minutes aggregately with someone who's infected on where you're going to get sick. So the point is, it starts to look at that. And what Bob talked about, I think is important. In 2 of our events, and again, this is all about teaching, 2 of our events, 6 days after in one, 7 days after another, we get the note that I've tested positive for COVID. Because I don't have a contact tracing system, my responsibility is to notify everybody that we've had a positive test. Please go get tested. Please let us know. We're going to continue to check up to 14 days. Positive is we did not have a single other positive case come back. And that was following up 14 days and then even up to 21 days. It never came back. We never had. So it means the protocols work when it's all said and done. But I'm always careful because I don't want to get beat up where people are like, well, did you test everybody? No, we didn't. So I can't confidently say that there was no spread. But I can tell you 90% of the people went and got tested. And that tells us confidently that there wasn't widespread if there was. The other 10% that didn't get tested, they're like, I'm fine, I'm good. I don't feel anything. But if you're asymptomatic, doesn't mean you don't have it. And it doesn't mean you got it there, by the way. It could come out afterwards, but I'm really cautious of saying we had an event and it was crystal clean. No, unless you're testing everybody and testing everybody up to 14 days, all I can tell you is the protocols were effective to make sure we didn't have widespread. And we were able to do that. I can tell you in one situation with one of our hotels confidently, they had a bubble they created with 160 people for a program for 4 weeks. And they had an employee that they were testing in the morning and in the evening. And they had an employee that, again, tested negative for 2 days, third day, tested positive that morning. And they've been around people now for a couple of days. They did not have a single other case over the 3 weeks, which is telling you the protocols worked. And even when she was working, they had protocols, keeping her 6 feet of separation, making sure they wore masks consistently. That was probably the only one I can confidently tell you that we know the protocols work, because everybody was tested every day for 3 weeks. So it's the only way you can finally get there. You got it.
Michael, thank you for being here. My name's Terry with Conference Direct. I noticed you hadn't mentioned contact tracing until just a second ago. Well, do you think that there's a power in contact tracing, or is there just too many cases right now that you can't even dig into it?
The schools, the states, there's too much because they're trying to do it with humans. It's never going to work. That's the issue. The contact tracing system, I'm telling you right now, if you could, and by the way, there's a few states that have adopted it. Google and Apple opened up a shared platform to be able to create this type of contact tracing. Problem is you have to have adoption. So if you're doing a meeting, you can require that everybody's going to have to wear their badge. And what I like about this contact tracing system, the issue they have is privacy, because it runs off Bluetooth and telephones. This system doesn't. You get basically, looks like a credit card that you would be wearing with your lanyard. And that's your tracking mechanism, and it's by a number. The only person who would know who it is would be the meeting professional and whoever else they designate. They're the only ones getting a report on that. So it's an important one, but the states, it's impossible. You see states giving up because they were trying to do it with people versus the technology. Had they adopted the technology and really enforced people trying to utilize that, they would have been much more effective. I do think you're going to see it for travel, because they're working right now on how you can do contact tracing on the travel side of it.
Yeah, because I think there would be power in the future to catch it in early stages and isolate it quickly so it doesn't hit general population.
Completely agree with you. And unfortunately, it's what the world's struggling with. Germany, in this outbreak, they told you, because everybody was saying, look at Germany, they know how to contact trace. They've told you they've lost complete control of it. They just can't. It's too many. You're welcome. Great question.
And before we completely thank this group as a group, I personally want to thank each and every one of you. I stalked Michael at every event, including when he was being interviewed at MPI. I was like,
really did.
Are you coming? Are you coming? We need you there. Bob, I think you were my first trip in Jamaica. It was fabulous. I've been to Al-High events, and I've also been to the Omni on a site inspection in my past COVID time. And they were the leaders that gave me the confidence to keep telling the group that put this together, we're doing it. We're going to be the first site group to do this. And we are all a team of leaders in this industry. And we are bringing these meetings back. So creative. Food and beverage has gotten more creative than you could ever wish for. I hope it never changes. You're fabulous. Michael leading the hotel charge with Ally, fabulous. And Bob, bring on those meetings. So thank you. And guys, bring the meetings back and talk to us. And please thank them. They're awesome.
Thank you.
Big mistake. Sorry about that. Thank you again. Let's give them all a big round of applause. Michael, Melissa, Bob, we appreciate your additional insights and the wonderful counsel. Great information, great session. For those of you virtually, thanks for the questions you sent in. We appreciate that very much. Shout out to all of you. We're grateful to have you with us. We're going to move forward now into our next session, our closing keynote speaker. And I want to point out a couple of things. Throughout this process of planning this Site Southeast Education Summit, as you can imagine, we have constantly had to make changes and adjust. And that's true with our closing keynote speaker. Scott Klososky tested positive for COVID just a few days ago. So through the magic of Zoom, the internet, we're going to bring him with us anyway. He's joining us live. Let me tell you just a few quick things about Scott. He has always been on the cutting edge of technology and innovation. He's recognized globally as someone who is accurately predicting future digital trends and how it applies to the business and our personal environment. He's going to talk to us virtually about what will never be the same in our travel industry and what some things we can expect are going forward. So let's give a welcome virtually to Scott Klososky.
Thank you. Thank you. Benny, I appreciate the introduction. And yeah, it is true that we tested positive at our house. And so this was just a good chance for us to play around a little bit with how to do keynotes when you've got to do them virtually because you don't have a lot of choice. So we're going to do a lot today while I give this keynote so that we can create some interaction between those of you who are online and also those of you who are there at the location. And we're going to start that by using Slido. And so what I need everybody to do, whether you're remote or whether you're on location, is I need you to go to slido.com. Now, you can either, if you know how to use your phone and just hold it up to a QR code, you could just hold it up to this QR code and it'll take you right to the site Slido. Now, if you don't know how to use a QR code, just call up a browser on your phone or your iPad or whatever you have, your laptop if you're one of the people at home. And when you get to Slido, all you have to do is type in the SITE. So it already has a hashtag, just put in the SITE, and then that connects you to me, and it connects you all together. And the reason we're going to do this is during this entire session, I'm going to send questions to you. And it's not so much polling. It's much more just sending you questions that you can all answer, and you can see what each other's answers are. And that's what we're going to do is I'm going to send 10 different questions to you. They relate a little bit to what I'm talking about on the slide. And this is a way for you all to see how you all feel. And both the people that are looking at this remote and the people who are on site will all be added together to be able to check what your opinions are. Now, every slide where I have a new question will have this icon on it. And so I'll remind you kind of as we go along. Now, if you're at home doing this, I always set up the screen something like what you see behind me, right? I might have the questions over to the side, the video up behind me. That way I can see everything all at once. So we're going to be extremely interactive with this session today. Now, I'm going to go ahead and send the first poll, right? So every time you see that icon, you know that there's a question coming. You now have a question. Again, if you all will go to Slido right now and start answering the question, you'll see the response. I'll see the response. I'm not always going to access it and do anything with it, but I may jump in every once in a while and do something with it. So anyway, go to Slido now and answer the first question from the SITE hashtag. Now, the other thing I will tell you is for those of you who are at home and you've got Zoom, I can see the Q&A questions come up in real time. I can see the chat in real time. And so you have 3 different ways to ask me questions. I mean, people can chat the questions, but you can use the Q&A in Zoom if you want to send a question. Or for those of you at the site, you can use Slido because you might notice Slido, there's 2 different icons or 2 different menu items. You can hit the live polls, which you're probably looking at now, right? And I see a number of you answering, which is fantastic. Right? Or you can hit the audience Q&A and you can send me questions on Slido as well. So I would encourage you, we have an hour together. I would encourage you to send me questions. Like I said, you can't see what I see, but I'm in a studio and I can see questions coming up. And I'll jump in and answer them as we go along. There's no Q&A at the end per se. All right. So you might have noticed the title to this is The Great Reset of 2020. I'm an optimist. I'll tell you that right now. I'm an optimist. And I'm an optimist who's been around for a long time. So I've seen things times that didn't go well, and then, things improve and they come back. I've seen us be able to get through times like this. But what I will tell you as somebody who studies the future is there is kind of a saying for those of us who study the future, and that is that the future often rhymes with the past. I always love that, right? The future rhymes with the past. In other words, things that have happened in the past, the future might be a little bit different, but it's often somewhat the same. So when we look back at big events historically from the last 100 years, each of those events has had a big impact on society, on the world in general. And so we've never been the same after these events. And it will be the same thing this year. We will never be the same. And the question is just, how will we change and how much will we change? I think it was Michael in the panel discussion, hopefully I got it right, Michael, that said, hey, don't think things won't go back to being a lot the way they were before. You know, people overestimate how much things will change after there is a big historical event, but they do change. They do not go all the way back to the way they were before. And that's really what we need to look at kind of in the incentive travel space and in the world and in our lives in general. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to visit with you about some, different areas of how the world will never go back to being exactly the same. Now, you might see I pushed the second question for you. So now's a good time for you to practice because, again, we got 10 and you saw how the first one worked. So whenever you're ready, just jump in and answer the second question. And again, the second question is, which of the following statements do you agree with? And it's a lot of questions about future pandemics. And so I'm just curious for you all to be able to see how each other feels about what might happen with future pandemics. Now, what I believe is that we will have more pandemics. This is certainly not going to be the last one. It's arguable whether the next one will be worse than this one. In other words, more highly communicable or have a higher death rate. But what we do know is we will have more pandemics. Now, when I look forward, I look at things and say, well, from this pandemic forward, we will learn a lot. This is the first time we've ever chosen as a world to react the way that we are reacting now. We haven't done a fantastic job, obviously, but we've done a pretty good job around the world. We've learned a lot. We've learned from our mistakes already in the last 7-8 months. And I think what we can see going forward is, we'll learn how to possibly stop pandemics and hold them to epidemics. That's something I think we're going to see quite a bit more is regional epidemics and a much better ability to isolate and stop an epidemic before it becomes a pandemic. I think we'll have much better data and analytics in the future. So one of the problems we've had is just the lack of information that you could even trust during this whole pandemic in 2020. But I think we'll get a lot better next time at having information that we could trust. We'll certainly be a lot better at getting faster testing out into the world, right? We'll be much better at having new digital tools. And I'll talk some more about the digital tools, but we're going to have much better digital tools for being able to solve what's going on. And so we know that the future response will be better, and it certainly will be different. Maybe in the travel space, the biggest thing that we have to understand from now on, what will happen is as soon as there is an epidemic in an area and travel will shut down, or, God forbid, there is another pandemic, what you're going to see is a much more rapid response of closing down travel, minimizing travel, changing the travel from airlines over to people driving, right? We will see this all happen much faster and much wider than what we saw before. Because at least for a generation or two, people will always remember what happened during this pandemic. It's a lot like the Great Depression, right? Any of us who have grandparents who lived through, or parents who lived through the Great Depression, they were never the same. They became savers. They washed off the tin foil and folded it back up and put it in the drawer. My grandmother wouldn't let a glass bottle go. Every glass jar, every jelly jar became something that she would store things in. Right? My grandmother she would never, waste anything that she could use. Whereas today we tend to throw so many things away. Right? She was forever changed, and it kind of went to her kids, my parents, and then it kind of dissolved a little bit, and then it really dissolved to my kids. I believe we'll see the same thing with pandemics. So basically, in our lifetimes, we will completely respond different to pandemics And I would say we will respond much better. All right, I noticed that you all on which statement do you agree with most? Two that were the highest. Countries will collaborate at a much higher level. The world will be much better at containing pandemics. So I think you agree that this was a great learning experience for us, and we will get better. All right, I mentioned disease tracking tools. I've got another question for you. And so let's talk a little bit about disease tracking tools. So one of the things, I'm a technologist, and one of the things that I know will get a lot better, and again, I heard the panel talking a little bit about contact tracing, and was talking about the fact that, hey, there's some new applications coming out that do a wonderful job of contact tracing. And that is absolutely true. And so it isn't just contact tracing. I think we're going to see a number of different technology tools applied. And so, we've seen everything from national tracking tools, where in countries, they literally had you wear a wristband and they tied all the information for COVID to the wristband, to, again, the mobile devices that Apple and Google have come up with which not every state has approved, by the way, which is a bit of a shame, because if every state would approve that, we would have a lot more people who would volunteer into contact tracing. But we also have a lot of digital tracking that can be done with testing. It took us too long to get testing in order. And then even once the tests are done, too long to be able to provide accurate information around what's going on with testing. And now we've got vaccinations. And so we have the whole, how do you create a vaccine, distribute a vaccine, decide who's going to get it, track who actually did get it taken. And so, again, when you get a chance, go to Slido and just ask this question, answer this question that I'm asking about, what would you be willing to do with a technology tracking tool? Now, the problem that we have in the United States with tracking tools is a privacy issue. And this is an interesting one because, again, in other countries, like if you take Bulgaria, Bulgaria, who is not as worried about personal privacy, they just created a device, stuck a device on everybody and said, you've got to wear this, right? So that anybody can be scanned and then we would know your history with COVID, right? Now, that makes a lot of sense if you're not worried about privacy. But in the United States, we have HIPAA laws, for example. And so we have actually gone out of our way to say, hey, we want to protect people from a privacy event. And so one of the things that is going to be big is, have you gotten a vaccine, right? And how are we going to prove that you actually got vaccinated? So I have another question for you here. And this is the question that a lot of people are asking of not only would you get a vaccine, what I'm asking you is, what would cause you to get the vaccine? Because what we've figured out just kind of in research is if you just ask people, hey, will you go get a vaccine? There's a lot of people who say no, never, or not until a lot of other people get it and I know it's safe. But it changes if you ask people, hey, if you have to have a vaccine in order to fly, if the TSA is going to check it, right, what would you do then? Which is a huge deal, obviously, in the travel space. And I'm not so sure that I don't think that's the way it should be, is that you have to prove that you've been vaccinated or prove that you have had COVID and gotten over it, right, and have a negative test. But anyway, love to know what your opinion on this is. I think one of the things that we're going to have to wrestle with the next pandemic is, where do we draw this line on privacy versus trying to slow down a pandemic? Because there's no question, if we just ignore privacy, right, then we could do full contact tracing. We would have very transparent information about whether you've had the disease or not, whether you've been vaccinated or not. Do you have antibodies? Even your temperature, right? All of these things could become very public. Now, it's interesting because if we ask people, well, how do you feel? Would you rather lose some of your privacy, your health data privacy, and slow down a pandemic? Or would you absolutely want to keep your privacy, and you're not worried so much about a pandemic? It's a very difficult question for people. And the big thing that I just want you to understand is, we will spend probably another 2-3 years after this pandemic, when the smoke is clearing and we're going back and doing all the after action reports. We're really going to have to talk about how much should we and can we apply technology to slow down a pandemic, because we know we can, but then how do we deal with the privacy, the HIPAA laws, the things that could help us be able to know whether somebody is safe or not safe, or do that high level of contact tracing. All right. Another topic that we know will absolutely not be the same is going to be work from home. And the question that I'm going to ask you now on Slido is all about which model you might go to. Now, this is an area where, as I said, I kind of agreed with Michael, I think, when he said that, look, in general, things often go back to a lot the way they were before, once the crisis has ended. And I believe that, I believe that a lot of people are going to go back to meeting in person and all of that. A lot of people are going to go back to flying. A lot of people will go back to vacations. They'll go back to going to concerts and going to sporting events. That will happen, even though it might take a year or two, it will happen. I'll tell you something that I think will not change, or probably will change quite a bit. And it will not go back to being the way it was, and that's going to be the working from home. So we had already in the world moved to more of a distributed work model. And now, of course, this has sped that up. And so organizations have figured out in some cases that they actually are just as productive or more productive by allowing some or many of their workers to work from home, right? To do this distributed work model in a bigger way. Now, we were forced into it in March or so. Before that, again, some companies were already doing this, but we were forced into doing this at high speed earlier this year. And so it was a forced test. And for a lot of organizations, they were able to figure out how to make this work. And so we've been asking people all along, just like we're asking you in this question on Slido, right? We've been asking people all along, what model might your organization go back to? And we've given them 5 choices, because that's what we've heard out in the market is either smaller organizations have said, we're just going to go to complete work from home. We only had 7 or 8 employees anyway, and we don't need to go into the office. We're just going to complete work from home. Or optional work from home. Organizations are just saying, look, you make the choice. If you want to work from home, you can work from home, but you have to make a choice because we have to know what to do with the office space, but it's optional. And then there's partial work from home based on the ability. So at a manufacturer, you can't have people just stop working on the manufacturing floor. And so in that case, the back office workers, the marketing people, accounting, maybe they work from home, but the people who actually work at the plant, they'll have to be there. And then the 2 that are becoming more popular that are newer, the split week work from home. The split week work from home is an interesting one, because the split week work from home means we come to work on Monday and Wednesday, but the other days we work from home. And so that way we know there'll be a couple days or 3 days that we all work together, but the rest of the time we may not work together, we'll work from home. So that's kind of the split week. And then we have more and more people moving to this HR awarded work from home days. So what HR is saying is, we'll give you 30 work from home days a year, 45 work from home days a year. You can use them anytime you want. All right. And so that's kind of the HR awarded. So 5 different models. And when you survey organizations and you ask them, are you going to go back to working just the way you did before in the office or at the plant? 80% say that they're going to change and go to one of these models. That is going to have a interesting trickle down effect on the economy. For example, I always kid around, you probably don't want to be in the dry cleaning business right now, because you're not going to need as many people who have to have their suits starched or their dresses cleaned, right? If you have a lot more people working from home, right? But definitely will have some impact if you have 20%, let's just say, of the workforce who changes to work from home, moves to a different place, right? Operates in a completely different way economically. So it's just something for us to keep in mind. All right, I've got a few questions that just on Slido I'd like to answer. So it said, this seems like a good solution to the fact that many times virtual event software that use Zoom often won't allow polling. So Whitney, yes, it's part of the reason that I wanted to show you what I'm doing. I wanted to be there. I can't even tell you how much I wanted to be there. Okay, Whitney, it killed me when I found out that I was COVID positive and I was going to have to do this virtually. When I talked to your folks, we said, okay, well, the one benefit about this is we could kind of show you how to create interactivity using a tool outside of a Zoom. And so we've been doing this for about 6 months now using Slido. We actually have other tools we use at times. And so the combination of Slido and Zoom allows an integrated audience to all communicate with whoever the speaker is. And so it works really well. And like I say, I don't do polling per se, but I fire all these questions just so that you can all see how each other feels, which kind of creates a second stream of value for you. That's my goal, is I want there to be value from you listening to me, but I also want there to be value from you seeing how each other feels about things. That's why I do that second stream of information on Slido. So anyway, thank you, Whitney. All right, somebody anonymously said, I will get one ASAP. It's the only reason I cannot be with all of you today in person, and it's Josh. And Josh, I'm sure you're talking about a vaccine. And Josh, I don't know if you're like me. When I first heard about vaccine, I thought, no, not me. I don't want to get it. I don't even get flu shots. You know, why would I get a vaccine? But the longer time has gone on, even though now I have COVID, I still think now I'll get the vaccine a lot faster than I thought. Because I've studied a little bit about vaccines, but also I want other people to be comfortable around me. And so I think that might be the safest way, is to get a vaccine. So I appreciate your comment, Josh. And then the second one, Josh, I think that's you, where you became non-anonymous, which is awesome. 84% are in the top 2 categories. So that's promising for people will get the vaccine eventually. And I agree. It's kind of the reason why I want you to see all the answers to these questions is, you know, at least I think we are moving from people feeling uncomfortable getting vaccines to feeling like, okay, it's something that I probably need to do. All right, so back to work from home. And by the way, just so you saw, you know, those of you who are remote, you can use the Zoom Q&A, or all of you can use the audience Q&A on Slido. So anybody can send any question in. I'll stop and address them as we go along. All right, so anyway, work from home. In the Great Reset, one of the biggest things that will never be the same is going to be the distributed work model, right? And how that is going to change. All right, so let's go on to just talking about some industry dynamics. And again, I've got a question here, and this is specifically about the incentive travel space. And so love to hear your opinions on this one. Just what do you think it's going to bounce back and look like? So that's kind of the question that I'm asking here. So again, jump into Slido, let us all see your opinions. Now, here's mine. Again, our company is called Future Point of View. And so we get paid to really study, you know, where are things going to go in the future? And for 6 months, we've been looking at different industries. And we get a lot of calls from people in industries asking us, hey, what do you think? So I thought I'd share a few things with you. First of all, from an event standpoint, I have a strong suspicion that we actually are going to be in better shape than we ever were with the event industry, in that we will be forced to, of course, do things virtually a little bit like you're seeing some of it today, but we're going to build an integrated model. And so over 21, what we'll see over and over again is people going from a full virtual model to then going to this integrated model with some on-site and some off-site. And that's what I see more and more that will happen with events. And it will not be a bad thing. This will be a good thing that we will someday look back and say, you know what, 2020 wasn't that much fun, but the nice thing about it was it really kicked us into gear with doing integrated events, because we could have always done integrated events. It's just that culturally, it just made sense to have in-person events or full online events. So what I think we'll see from now on is there will be more and more acceptance. And what it will actually do at both events and meetings is it will allow us to have more people participating. So one of the things that we have noticed with some of the events that we've been involved in is there have actually been more people participating than would have gone in person. Now, this is going to grow over time. In other words, let me say it to you this way. If you were an association and you had an in-person event and you charged $1,000 to go to the in-person event and you got 500 people from the industry that went to the event, there was probably another 2,000 people that would love to go to the event, but their companies aren't going to pay the airfare and the $1,000 event fee for them to go to the event. I am very certain one of the things we're going to see with events and a bit with meetings is you're going to see more people attend than we had in 2019. Now, instead of 1,000, or pardon me, my example, 500 people attending in person, what you're going to have is 400 attend in person, but 1,000 attend virtually. So there'll be 1,400 people involved in the event instead of 500. And so I feel pretty strongly that that's how this will go, especially because now that we've done a lot of virtual events, a lot of people have figured out how easy it is to attend a virtual event or how to organize an event. So it's not just a straight 8-10 hours and maybe spread it out over 2-3 days so that it's easier for people virtually to attend. It gives more networking time for the people on site. Now, meetings, if we scale down and just talk about smaller meetings, not so much big events, now what happens is just, it's not so automatic to have meetings in person. So I'm talking about inside of companies or even small associations. If there's a board meeting, this is a good example. We've been having to have board meetings all over the United States for the last 8 months, all virtually, because people couldn't really have board meetings in person. And I'm on some boards. And one of the things I've noticed is that more and more there's discussion of from now on, we're not going to have all these board meetings in person anymore. We'll have 2 in person and the rest can be virtual. So meetings will change. Travel, I think this is probably no shock to anybody. Airlines and rental cars are going to struggle for a while. So in other words, it'll be a while before we get back to 2019 levels. Now, will that be 22 or 23? I do not believe it'll be in 21. And so for airlines and rental cars, I think it's going to be a little bit before they get back to that 2019 level, but I do see it happening at some point. Now, hotels and resorts, it's a little bit better picture because in that case, you have people who can drive to the locations. And so I see kind of the revenue and the people going to hotels and resorts, that being a little bit faster because again, you can drive and not fly. And as people become more and more confident in the hotels, more and more confident in just being out amongst the public, I think we'll see it bounce back quite a bit faster. Entertainment, this one could be tough. So big concerts, big sporting events and movie theaters, things where there are large groups of people all sitting 1 foot or 6 inches from each other. I think this is going to be a little bit. Again, I don't see this all bouncing completely back in 21, maybe more in 22, right? Would we see this kind of thing bounce back? But I think that there is a group of people, whether it might trend much, older and much younger, who say, you know what, I would just as soon get my entertainment virtually and be safer than being out in public. And so again, we might have some people who never go back to doing these things. I don't see it as a big percentage, but we could see something. Commercial real estate, just for fun, I think we know that is going to change. There is a lot of for lease signs out today already. I think in 21, we're going to see a glut of commercial real estate space because most organizations on the other side of that work from home, if you even have 20% of your workforce that goes more distributed, then you just do not need all that office space anymore. And organizations, again, are starting to figure out we can keep pollution down. We can stop people having to commute an hour each way, which makes them more productive working from home. Sometimes we got happier team members working from home. Not all of them, but some of them, right? So we know commercial real estate will be different. And then, as I mentioned, I wouldn't want to be in the high-end clothing store or dry cleaner business because, again, not only do we have more people working from home who do not need to dress really nice, or at least don't need to dress really nice from the waist down, we also have the situation that just in general, now that people are starting to go back to offices, they're carrying back that informality even more. And so we have a client that's always been suit and tie. And that was really starting to be a problem, before COVID. But now after COVID, the suit and tie thing is gone because people weren't going to wear a suit and tie at home to get on to a Zoom call. And so now as they kind of bring them back to the office, nobody is willing or interested in wearing suit and ties coming back to the office. So anyway, we know that some industries are going to change. All right, a comment just about leadership before I kind of go on to technology a little bit. When this all first happened in basically late February, March, I was trying to figure out how I could help the world. And I will never forget, I go into my office and I sit down in my office and I was very frustrated because I wanted to do something and I didn't know what I could do. So I picked out 100 CEOs who I know, and I started writing an email every single day called Modern Churchill. And I did this for about 3 months. Every single day, 7 days a week, in the morning, I sent a Modern Churchill email. And I called it Modern Churchill because I reached back to some quotes and the spirit of how Churchill helped his country get through World War II. And I mixed it with some more modern philosophy. It's just something that I think we really should have learned. If we talk about the Great Reset last year and what will never be the same, certainly leadership has to continue to evolve. We had to do two things at once. I don't know how much you observed this, but just I observed this with leaders that we work with. One of the things that we had to do very quickly was be Churchillian in being able to motivate and inspire people during a tough time. Now, Churchill had a lot of flaws. He had a lot of flaws as a human being. One thing Churchill was good at was cheerleading and helping his country get through a really desperate time. The modern part, though, was how do you lead home-based teams? So now how do you be a good, effective leader when you can't be right in front of them? When the most you get is a little bit of video with them. And so there was a whole new skill that we had to develop this year as leaders of being able to help people get past a difficult time, but use technology to be able to do it, which we hadn't had to do before that. All right. I'm going to send a new question, and then I also want to answer. I see Josh has made a couple comments as well. So I've got a new question I just sent you about digital transformation, and it's just how much do you believe the digital transformation is sped up? And we'll talk about that in a second, but I'd love to know your opinion if you guys will go to Slido and answer that. So Josh, I see your comment. Ironically, we can share the incentive travel trip virtually with those who missed the award and therefore use it as an additional motivator to make the next one. And I agree with you, Josh. There's a lot of irony about what's happened this year. You know, that's just a good example, is that we're having to find new ways to give incentives and maybe award them virtually and then extend what we would do physically with them. So good comment. And then, it's not seen as rubbing salt into the wound for not making the trip, but as being transparent, inclusive to everyone eligible. So good comments, Josh. All right. So I'm just looking at your votes so far. 2 years, 3 years seems to be the amount of time. I saw an article not too long ago that said that the writer believed that the pace of digital transformation would have been sped up 5 years in 6 months this year. Now, that's the reason I'm asking you, is I don't know if there's any magic to that at all, but clearly the digital transformation is sped up. And like I mentioned to you, leadership got difficult this year because we were forced to use video conferencing. We were forced to use online collaboration to be able to have to lead. It was our only connection in a lot of cases to the people that we do lead. And so technology clearly has sped up the adoption across all of these things. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on each one of these individually, but just, clearly, e-commerce and the gig economy, best thing that ever could have happened to Amazon was this, right? But just e-commerce in general. And then the gig economy, people delivering things. We at our house, we had not used Instacart, right? Or, the gig economy to deliver anything until the three of us all were COVID positive. And now we have friends and gig economy people coming 2-3 times a day, bringing us food, bringing us things, supplies, just things that we need. And so, we've had to sign up for all kinds of things. Then self-serve systems, right? One of the things that you all might have seen is just the difference in self-serve systems, right? The fact that, especially like government services, when you couldn't go to a window and get a government service anymore, one of the things that we had to do was get a lot better with just providing self-service capabilities out in the world. And so that grew. And then automation grew. And automation, when I think about things that will never be the same and what's been sped up in the digital transformation, I would say automation is one of the biggest things that we will see changed. I'll tell you a story that illustrates this. So there was a client that we knew, and they had always paid their payables by accepting invoices in some way. And then once they got invoices, somebody keyed the invoice into their accounting system, and then it got approved, by hand in the system. And then a check got printed, and then they took the checks to the CFO signed the checks. Not an uncommon way. But when COVID happened, by about April, they had to pay bills. And so they went to a cloud-based accounts payable system and rebuilt their entire system in about 3 weeks and went to an automated cloud-based system to do their payables. So they were forced into automating. And again, because I spend a lot of time looking into the future, one of the things that I think is good for us to understand is that automation will now move even faster than it ever would before. Now, before COVID, the World Economic Forum had already put this information out, which was interesting, right? Which said, if you look at the amount of work done by a human versus the amount of work done by a machine, right, it is going to change quickly between 2018 and 2025, meaning that, let's just say, half of all work done in the world will be done by a machine by 2025, and half of all the work will be done by a human. Now, I don't know if they're exactly right with this rate of automation, but I do know that COVID has sped it up. And so what COVID showed us was there were a lot of things that we were doing by hand that we now need to automate so that they could be done if we have an emergency work from home event. And so I always try to say to people, because some folks say this is terrible, right? It's going to cost a bunch of jobs. But what I want people to understand is, sure, machines are going to consistently replace tasks done by human beings. It does not mean that the economy is going to crash or that we're going to have the huge high unemployment. What it does mean is every time you automate something that was done by a human, that human is now freed to do something else. They're freed to do something else. And that's a critical thing to understand. Is I actually believe that automating things will take over 20-30% of what's done by humans today in the next 5 years or so. But I believe it frees us to do something better with our time and our lives, do something that is more human, being creative, the connecting with other human beings, building trust, for example. So this is one of the biggest outcomes I think we're going to look back on 2020 is not just, hey, we got better at video conferencing or we got better at doing integrated events. I think we're also going to look back and say, it was amazing how much we automated, because we will have automated so much more than what we have before. So a way for you to think about this is that we have sped up the digital transformation, and technically what we have sped up is what is called humology, okay? The integration of humans and technology to get things done, right? Which is the word humology. Now, I've pushed another question to you. And so in this question, it's all about, is technology making our life better or worse? And so love to know what your opinions are about what you think the impact of technology is as we move to this kind of humological future. Now, if you're having trouble understanding, what humology means, let me show you an easy example, okay? There's a scale, and what the scale measures is how much human is involved in a task versus how much technology is involved in a task. And so we go H, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, T, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with the middle being half human, half technology, right? So every task that you do, okay, everything that we're doing, like putting on this event right now, that, we might argue that putting on the event in an integrated way, the way we've done it, it's an H2. So in other words, instead of an event that might be H4 because everybody was there in person and we used just a little bit of technology to project slides, right? In this case, maybe we're over at H2. And maybe events in the future go all the way over to a T1, right? And then they stop there because there are always humans putting on the event. There just might be humans all attending virtually, right? But the simplest way to think about a humology scale is this. Think about a turnpike, right? Way back in the day, like when Benny was young, okay? I need somebody who is older, right? When Benny was young, okay, tolls were 10 cents and it was always a human that took them. It was an H5 task. Now, for some of us, along the way, they got the coin toss. So now you had two ways to pay your toll. You had an automated way and a physical way. So let's say collecting money on a turnpike was now an H3. And then we got the pike passes. And now we could say, okay, if you looked at all the revenue that was collected, right, maybe it's now at a T1 as far as how much technology is being used to collect the toll. And then a lot of turnpikes, this is an example down in Texas, they just started saying it's not worth having a human there anymore. There's not enough people who exit, but we still need to collect their money, right? So now there's no human involved. There's just a coin toss. And then eventually, right, they just went to complete RFID, which I would argue, let's say, is all the way over at T4.5. All they do is take a picture of your license plate. They automate having a bill go to you. They automate all the collection. Right, so the only human involved here is just the ones doing the programming. All right, so this is what humology looks like, right? When I talk about automation, we talk about going from something that was completely done by hand to using a little bit of technology to some technology to a lot of technology and then to fully automating. Now, I just share this with you because I want to make sure you have the picture in your mind. When we talk about what happened in 2020 and what will never be the same, when we say we sped up the digital transformation by 3 years, 5 years, however much time we sped it up, what we're saying also is that we have dramatically sped up automation. And there's a lot of good reasons to do that, right? When you automate things, you lower the cost per transaction and you actually improve the efficiency and throughput. So there's a lot to like about automation. Just something to watch over the next 2-3 years is a heavy amount of automation coming in. All right, so let's see, I've got a question from Whitney. Whitney says, or a comment, simply something like Zapier that automates processes is a huge time saver and makes us more efficient. So Whitney, absolutely, and I wasn't going to say this, but I guess I will now that you brought that up. Think about something like RPA. So Zapier is a good tool. If you're not familiar, RPA is robotic process automation. And so RPA is one of the hotter technologies right now. RPA creates virtual robots. So instead of a physical robot, it automates a process on your computer. And organizations that are heavy into RPA right now, they're automating, let's say 10, 15, 20% of the entire organization because they know how to use RPA as a tool. And so, yes, there are a lot of tools coming on the market like Zapier, Whitney, that allow you to automate things, even at a small scale. But again, what I want you to watch is just when you think about the incentive travel space and think about any industry, what we're going to see is a pretty rugged and constant automation now for 2 years. We were already automating things, but 2020, because when we went to work from home, we saw all the things that were done by hand, and we saw how much we could just put online and make it self-service. Because of all of that, it dramatically has changed the appetite to automate things fully. And because this is the business our firm is in, we are seeing all kinds of clients right now investing a lot of their IT dollars in automating things. So the next time a pandemic comes around, they don't have to worry about things being done by hand. They don't have to worry about having trouble with their customers, not being able to go get things done because there was some component that was done by hand. All right, I see some of you have already answered the 9th question. Love for the rest of you to go answer this question. So this one's just on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being very positive, 1 being negative. How optimistic are you about 2021 having a full recovery? All right, love to see your opinions. Your opinions are probably more important than my opinion, right? So just go answer the question. It's cool. I see up to 25 of you have answered. You're doing great. All right. I told you I'm an optimist. So I had shared that with you earlier, that I'm an optimist. I want to share with you just some thoughts specifically about that. I think we all have heard this meme about the Terminator movies or Alien or all the movies that show these dark apocalyptic futures. In a lot of cases where machines take things over. It bothers me. I love science fiction, right? And I love movies as much as anybody else. But I'm very bothered by the fact that in humanity, we tend to enjoy for our entertainment only seeing a dark future. And a lot of this is caused because a good movie or a good story, there's a challenge and then the heroes have to overcome the challenge. So what our writers have done too much of is they always paint the future as a very dark, foreboding place, post-apocalyptic, okay? Where then the heroes have to recover from whatever that disaster is. But the problem with that is it's slowly teaching everybody that the future is likely to be a negative place when there really is no proof of that. I've seen some really interesting things written lately that say, hey, you know what, humanity is doing much better than we give ourselves credit for. So, you know, little things like around the world, poverty rates dropping, child mortality shrinking, right? We have less and less people dying in wars. The quality of life is rising, right? More people having clean water. If you really are into facts, like data and facts, the data and the facts show us that we've made a bunch of progress as a world, right? As humanity over the last 20 or 30 years. Now, are there still a lot of bad things going on in the world? Of course there are, right? Are there still people dying that shouldn't be dying? Absolutely there are. And we have our share of problems in the United States. But if you just look at the data, we have been improving steadily for generations. And there is no reason to believe that it's just going to stop now. We have been improving for hundreds and hundreds of years, and I'm very sure we will continue to make improvements. That's the first thing I would tell you about why I see a bright future. That's a big picture. The second thing is, I will tell you that we have an incredible ability to solve problems. As poor as we have responded to the pandemic in some ways, we have also made some great decisions as far as how we respond to the pandemic. I am very certain that we have saved many, many lives. Yes, it is tragic how many people have died of this disease, But I am also absolutely certain that if we would not have done some of the pretty dramatic changes that we put in place this year, many more would have died. We have an incredible ability to solve problems as humanity. Now, I will also say over time, sometimes we're not very great at solving problems instantly. But when we have a crisis, we are very good at looking at what were the causes of that crisis and then making improvements and healing. We have always been good at that, especially in the United States. And I believe we always will be good at that. We will learn our lessons from 2020. It will be a great reset year for us, and we will be better on the other side of it. And then I am a technologist. And so as a technologist, I have to say, technology has such potential to help the world, and it already is. Now, again, are there negative aspects to technology? You bet there is. The last book I wrote was called Did God Create the Internet? The whole book, 3 years of research, was all about technology ultimately going to be a good or a bad thing for humankind. And I'll save you having to get the book if you don't want to go get it. And that is, I say it's 55% good and 45% bad, technology is. In other words, good has a lead. And so there's more good than bad with what we're doing to apply technology. And so again, back to like the automation and the speeding up the digital transformation. My mother, who's 80 something years old, she can now do things with her computer she could never do before. She can Zoom, she can do Instacart. If it's icy outside, she doesn't have to go get in her car and try to drive around to a grocery store. I mean, my mother was forced in 2020 to learn how to use technology that she can now use the rest of her life that will help her. All right. There were a lot of good things about speeding up the digital transformation in 2020. And so again, I believe technology is going to be able to help us be healthier. If you haven't tried it yet, the new Amazon wristband that they have, I've been using it a lot lately. Their new health device, it actually checks your sleep and your steps and all the normal things, but it added another one that was interesting, which was tone of voice. So it measures your tone of voice all during the day and just tells you whether your tone of voice was positive or optimistic or negative and pessimistic. So we are constantly getting new devices that will help us be smarter. I say all this to say, at the end of a tough year, okay, and believe me, this year was no picnic for me either. I have always loved being a speaker. I have loved standing in front of you in person, talking to you afterwards, shaking your hand, interacting with all of you. And I lost that this year. And I miss it terribly. That's why it killed me so much to not be there with you in person. When we go back to being able to meet in person, I will probably value it even more. But what I will not do is look at 2020 and say to myself, worst year ever, there's no value out of this year at all. There were a lot of things I learned this year, a lot of things I'm grateful for, and I see a really bright future going forward. And I hope all of you do as well. In the incentive travel space, in the speaking space, in the event space, in life in general, I hope you also are seeing that there is a brighter future to come. All right. So I'm going to push your last question to you. And this is just a question about kind of what statement about 2020 best fits your thinking. So I told you about my optimistic view of 2020. But again, I would love to see how you all feel about 2020. So I'll give you a minute to answer this while I do a couple of other things to kind of close us up here. I love this statement. During times of chaos, you must love progress more than you fear change. When I think about quotes from 2020, this is one that I've been saying to myself all year. Okay, during a time of chaos, I've got to love the progress more than I fear the change. I will tell you, in March, when I stopped, being able to fly around and meet with clients or give speeches, that was the first time in 30 years, and I'm not exaggerating with you, that was the first time in 30 years that I wasn't on the road. And after about 3-4 weeks of being home every single day, I really had to start thinking about how I felt about that, because I have always been on the road, met lots of people, seen lots of cool places. And now I was home every day. And I thought about it for a while, and I had said, look, I love being home with my wife. I love being available home with my kids. They're all grown, but it's nice to be here when they're here. It's nice to be able to get into a bit more of a routine, and, I'm getting some more sleep. And so I looked at it and just said, it's a season, right? So 2020, maybe into 2021, it's a season. And so for a while, I won't be able to do, all the things that I would love to do. But there's a lot to learn. And I have learned a lot about how much I just appreciate the house I have, or how much I just appreciate my family. Those are all things that I've taken away. But I definitely had to let go of the fear of, hey, all the speaking that I've done for years and years, I'm not going to be able to be in front of audiences anymore. And so we built a studio. We put lots of technology in place to be able to do things like this. That's the change that I made, is to say, okay, well, how could I be the absolute best virtual speaker I could be, right? And that's the change I made really quick, is I don't want to fear being the best virtual speaker I could be just because I love speaking in person. I want to be able to do both. And maybe the rest of my career now, I'll do a lot of international work virtually, but hopefully the domestic work, I'll be able to fly and see you in person from now on. All right, Josh, I just see the last comment from you. The first 2 quarters of next year will be slow until the vaccine distribution is completed and effective. Then the last half of the year should be dramatically improved. So I like how you're thinking, Josh. I think, again, kind of like Michael said, it's really good to understand that things often go back to a lot the way they were. In this case, they'll never go back to exactly the way they were. But when it comes to travel, when it comes to, in-person events, we will go back to pretty close to the way we were. It's just a matter of when. And so I agree with you, Josh. I hope by the end of 2021, we're back to more 2019 levels. All right, I noticed that in your question, 44% of you, what does not kill me makes me stronger. So I made a lot of progress. And then 37% said, a year of chaos that caused me to make many improvements in my life. If I added those together, 81%, right? 81% of us, have an optimistic view, which is fantastic. All right. I always give everybody copies of the slides if they would like them. You've got a couple of ways you can get a copy of the slides. If you just want to go to this website address, the futurepointofview.com/SK, my initials. If you go there, you'll see this talk is listed right at the top. Or again, if you know how to use your camera and QR codes, you can just use this QR code. Either one of them will take you there. And so, please, if there's anything that you could do with these slides that would be helpful to you, please feel free to use them. It's fine with me. If you're interested in kind of technology and an optimistic view of the future, I do a podcast at my website, the Klososky.com website. It is just an optimistic view of what technology is going to do in the future across a lot of different technologies. And then I also write a blog. It's at the same website. It's just the Future Point of View blog, which is just my kind of future view of where technology is going to go. So if you're just looking for some other things to put into your river of information, please go check these things out when you get a chance. I do them just to try to be helpful to the world. All right. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you for everyone who has answered on Slido. Again, sure wish I could have been there in person for those of you that are on site. But, at least we got to have this time together and look at some ways we could use technology to interact with each other. Hopefully I've inspired some ideas that you all can keep talking about over the next few hours as we go along. All right. And I will throw it back to you in Asheville. Benny, I don't know if you're picking it back up, but I'll hand it back to you.
I'm picking it up, Scott. Thank you so much. Can you see me, I guess? Scott? Yeah, we wish you all the best, you and your family, for a full and complete, quick recovery. You look like you're doing a lot better now. And we are so grateful. This has been, frankly, an amazing session because you have demonstrated, been a wonderful example of what having a unique event is all about. You have shown us how we can integrate an audience and engage an audience both virtually and live and in person, and there I am. So we thank you for doing that, and it's been a perfect session. Thanks for all the live questions. Yes, another for Scott. Thank you. So we appreciate the virtual audience again and all the questions you ask. We appreciate Deborah and Kendra and, oh my goodness, so many names. I wish I could toss them all out. I got to at least shout out to Josh. Josh, you kept it alive for us. Thank you. You're a rock star. Anyway, so we really appreciate the live questions too. So as we move on, I'm going to turn some time over, first of all, to Joyce from Puerto Rico for a special presentation. She's been a wonderful partner of us for Site Southeast this entire year. Following Joyce, you'll hear from Nancy Gage, who's going to share information about what's going on with our auctions and our jewelry and so forth. And then we'll wrap up with Kathy Jones, our current Site Southeast president. Okay, take it away, girls.
Good morning. Well, I'll make it brief. I'm going to go ahead and show you a video. I know that all of us have been doing many virtual site inspection, FAM trips, and I don't know about you, but I'm ready for live events as well. And, you know, Puerto Rico is too. We just want to go ahead and share a testimonial that we'd had recently with a client that came down for a site inspection. Who better than hear it from your colleague, someone that came down for a site and pre-planning visit. So.
Me and my team and Randy are here to check out the island and make it the most spectacular trip possible for our customers. We arrived at the airport. We were greeted by a DMC, which was awesome. The luggage was handled very nicely. Once we got to the health screening area where they were able to take down our information, it was actually pretty quick. As long as you had your stuff filled out correctly, you were moved right along as long as you had your test results available.
What Puerto Rico has that I think a lot of our customers will really enjoy is a destination where you can experience hundreds of years of culture, unlike other Caribbean destinations.
The architecture and the colors are amazing. They live up to the pictures that you see.
It's also a big city, a lot to do.
Bacardi is amazing. It was truly probably one of the funnest experiences that I've had on any of our preferred pump trips. Learning about the history of it, and honestly, they brought in some of the culture of your island, and then to actually get to, you know, we did the mixology class, so we got to experience making it and stuff. It was exciting. It was a lot of fun, something very different. The nature of this island is gorgeous. The layout of it all, the rainforest, it was beautiful.
Well, the rainforest is unlike any Caribbean island. There are some countries in the world that obviously have a rainforest, but they're not beach destinations like Puerto Rico has to offer. The people of Puerto Rico are very friendly, nice. They're responsive. They communicate well to the U.S. tourists. They have a good sense of humor and seem to be very proud of their country, which is very nice to see.
I mean, this is just, you know, to show you that we can do these site inspections safely and with great success. I'll be around. If you have any questions, feel free to pull me aside. I'll be more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, so we have been having so much fun at the jewelry little shop today. It was a neat little idea. We didn't know how it was going to kick off, but there's a bunch of ways to pay us: cold hard cash, Venmo, Cash App. So just what I totaled just before our last session, we are over $350 worth of jewelry. So as you know, there's no big ticket items. So I think there's a lot of little happy campers in the audience who have little baggies full of stuff. So thank you. it's been fun. So we are going to continue that. We are going to continue the silent auction. There are also board baskets, which again, we try to be a little fun and have a little internal board competition too, who gets the most little tickets in their basket for their basket. So all of that will wrap up tomorrow after the first educational session ends. So like at 10 a.m. is on the schedule, I think. So make sure you buy the rest of the jewelry on the table. Whatever we don't have gone by then, we have another creative thing we might do. And then whatever is remaining at the end is going to go to a women's shelter that happens to be in Charlotte, North Carolina, just because it's all going to go back in my car to Charlotte. So we're spreading the wealth around North Carolina as well. So that's it. So yeah, we've made some good money to raise funds for a bunch of our different programs. So thank you. Put all your tickets in my basket so I win the popularity contest. And I think that's all I was supposed to do. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy. Oh, no. I am going to let one thing out of the bag because it's been so fun. We are going to do the jewelry thing at our kickoff in person for our next meeting. And we may up the program a little bit too. So start counting now or figuring out what you're going to bring to donate to our next jewelry program in January.
Thank you, dear. Can you hear me now? February. So thank you. And you guys give us your creative ideas too. Our best ideas, Nancy and I start having a glass of wine and then we're like, oh my gosh, we should bring clothing to Aruba. Oh, let's make it better. And I can't remember, AJ was at the table and we took that little idea and we went with it. And so we started our Sight Southeast suitcase and we did take the clothes to Aruba, but unfortunately we didn't get to go to Aruba. And the same thing with the jewelry. We're all moving, right? Some of us are selling our houses, cleaning out drawers. Nancy and I were on the phone separately drinking and we started talking about the jewelry thing. And we're like, come on, we've all got the jewelry that we just won't let go of. Clean it out, get rid of it. I have other tips too, so call me now. But anyway, if you guys have some really cool ideas, like bring it to us because that was another thing. We want to win an award this year for Sight Southeast, so bring those to us. And speaking of that, you know how this year we're repeating everything? Wait, hold on, I'm supposed to smile. Well, she told me to stop talking, which is very hard from a Jersey girl. But anyway, so with that said, we're repeating everything. So we're going to do a little repeat of last night because the delivery man didn't show up on time. Santa was a little late. So with that said, I know you already know, but my president's choice was Kim for her phenomenal work this year. And with that said, Vanna. Thank you, Vanna. So with that said, I'd like to award you. Where are you? Where are you hiding behind me? I'd like to award you. Don't touch it. Again, I love you. I'll stop calling you. She just found out I also called her husband for information. She's like, you have my husband's number too? I'm like, I have everyone's number. And then for our next award, as you all know, again, our lifetime award goes to Deborah, who is fabulous. And please don't stop bidding on the auction items. Deborah and Kathy and Pam have put so much into this. And like, if you see someone walking down the street, let them come in and bid on it. Like, I don't care who bids on it. Let's just bring the money in. But thank you for everything. You've been a member for how long? Oh, thank you, Ben.
Ever since the beginning.
So it's going to be 13 next year. Yeah. Lucky number. All right, touch it there and I'll touch it here. All right. Awesome. Thank you, baby. I love you.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Don't take a picture. Okay. So let's see. Now am I doing reminders? We already talked about that. We already talked about that. So the next fun thing is, speaking of something new and different, we decided this year that, yes, we're going to do our normal CSR event, which you all know is back at the Foundry after we go to lunch, and we'll lead you to lunch. But something new was we decided during these hard times that we wanted to give back again to our family. And since Asheville is now part of our family because they have been so awesome, possibly a new chapter thing going on here. We asked the general manager of the foundry to select one of his frontline employees. And you've probably seen him around. It's none other than David, who has been there since we got here, however many days ago it is. He's been fabulous. Like everything you needed. Like he's like, yes, Miss Jones. Yes, Miss Jones. I kind of want to take him home with me. I can't get Ron to say that to me. But anyway, David's been awesome. And I would like to invite General Manager Derek up to the stage to accept it. He is home with, actually he's at the doctor's with his 2 twin little babies. Thank you for your kind contributions, as you all know, the diapers and what have you that you brought. And David still doesn't know, I've also stalked him the entire week saying like, what are you doing tomorrow? What time are you leaving? So please come up and accept you can grab one of the mics, unless you talk loud.
Hello, everyone. South East, I see there's a lot of partners in here, and we're very fortunate to have David Bruce as part of our team. Just a little backstory, during the first turn of COVID, that was back in March, we had to go through the part of not having a playbook as to having to try to make all these ends meet, still create a destination that stays open for the masses, for all of our teams, for all of you who bring wonderful events and groups to our location to be able to experience this, how we're able to maintain these doors open. These are one of the unspoken heroes right here. This gentleman that you see right before you really took the time, as we all did, but he really went to the front. And there was a point where we were just staying at the hotel, because it required for us to be there, for us to make sure that the doors are still open for the rest of our team when they return. This is part of the way that we're able to get through. We wouldn't have this hotel with the doors open at the level that we're at without David's commitment. We're very fortunate to come in, day out, see him at the front desk, greeting all of our guests, and then all of your groups that come in here also as well, that we can go ahead and establish this great event for them. A little background about David. His wife is a nurse, and she is a very busy, very busy woman. Along with that, they just had twins also as well, and with them having the twins, they still continue to deliver the performance that she does at the hospital, and then with David to be able to deliver this performance that he does here in these hotels. Again, I just want to say thank you to all of you. These are unprecedented times, and during these times right now, how do we change this? Well, we set precedents, and that sets a new standard. That sets a new standard by us being able to go ahead and carry out amazing events such as this, still practice all of our safety and social distancing, and creating all these great events. This is a perfect example that we have all put all of our time in. You have all put all of your time in, and David as well as frontline, willing and ready to accept all of your team and everyone that comes to our destination. And for that, we thank you immensely for choosing Asheville, and we just couldn't be any happier. But one more thing I do want to add. I am not the GM. I was actually Larry.
I know you're not.
Oh yeah, so I came up, I'm like, oh,
I
yes,
do that.
yes, assistant
It's the
GM.
assistant GM.
So I don't want to take his thunder, but I will.
But you're here, so just go.
Yes, but again, 1,000 thanks. And we do appreciate everything you do day in, day out. And only because of you allows us to really put ourselves out there and show the world that what we can do, and during these unprecedented times, what we can deliver and how we can still make this an amazing destination for everyone and yourselves. So please, all together, let's all keep moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And with that said, their staff and their team is phenomenal. So thank you so much. You couldn't have been kinder. I've had compliments of people saying you really found the right destination, because they got it. Like they just took it and ran with it. So thank your team for us.
You're very welcome. We only speak hospitality because you know what? We actually love what we do.
Awesome. Thank you. And with that said, I want you guys, maybe Kelly will probably kill me, but maybe we'll do a little contest. Like one of my takeaways, I love the saying about what Michael said about like, let's not judge. We all have different ways of doing things, but there's no right or wrong way. It's just your way or my way, right? And it's funny because we were going to breakfast, our board breakfast. Oh my gosh. It was a board breakfast and we all had our opinion on how it should be. And I'm like, let's just sit down and eat, okay? I don't care. Or I won't eat. But like, it's true. It's like, none of us are going to do it the way the other person thinks, but we all know, like, look at this. It turned out and we all just worked together through it, and, might be the right, not not the right way, or maybe not, maybe yes, but just kind of remember that. That's my takeaway. And maybe we'll figure out a little contest of everyone giving us a one-liner of what their takeaway is. So anyway, with that said, we have a team that's going to march us down to our lunch. Oh, there he is, Joseph in the back. He's the elf. And he'll be leading us to lunch. And then after lunch, we'll go back to the foundry for our CSR. And then don't forget, tonight is holiday festive. It can mean anything, a sweater, pajamas, but it's gotta be holiday festival. So anyway, see you guys and thank you. And don't forget your contest on social media, LinkedIn, hashtag Site Southeast, hashtag meeting AVL. Thank you.